Chapter 2369. Bullshit. Helplessness cursed. What's the use of these battle merits? Only when a person is alive can there be battle merits. If a person is dead, there will naturally be no battle merits. Even the heavens don't give me a chance to breathe. Helplessness raised his head and said, I originally wanted to go into seclusion to break through to the golden core realm. How can this old man still have the mood? Husband, Zhuo Minghui, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. Things have already come to this. Husband, you should calm down a bit. As she spoke, Zhuo Minghui's hand naturally rested on her belly. Grandmaster, why is your belly so big? Xiang Zhili restrained himself for a long time, but in the end he couldn't hold back and asked, Did you eat too much? You child. Zhuo Minghui's face turned even redder. Yan Xinglian looked at Zhuo Minghui's bashful expression and stole a glance at Xiangyang. Xiangyang was also a bit unnatural. Ever since helplessness, Zhuo Minghui used a secret technique to consume the inner cores of the male and female lightning beasts. They rarely came to helplessness's cave. They were afraid of this kind of awkwardness. No one knew the power of the inner cores better than them. Now that Xiang Zhili asked, they could not answer. Leah, Yan Xinglian waved her hand and said, Grandmaster is pregnant with your junior martial uncle. It's just like when you were in mother's arms when you were young. Oh, this child is aware of this. Xiang Zhili came to a realization, but he still said casually, Grandmaster is already so old. How can you still be pregnant with junior martial uncle? Junior martial uncle. Wouldn't he be even younger than the boy? Zhuo Minghui was so embarrassed that her face turned red like a piece of cloth. She almost wanted to fly back to the inner palace. Xiang Zhili was still smart after all. He immediately realized his inappropriate behavior and Zhuo Minghui's embarrassment. He chuckled and said, It's great that Lear has a junior martial uncle. Lear will definitely take good care of him and protect him well. As soon as he said that, the four of them felt their hearts ache, and tears almost flowed out. Sigh, it seems like my myriad Thunder Valley is lacking in people. With Lear and Wuqing, Xiaohua and Hongshun are going. Xiang Zhili gritted his teeth and sighed. Wuqing? Zhuo Minghui was shocked and asked curiously, Husband, is this the name you gave a child? That's right. Helplessly, he nodded. Man's suffering in this world is burdened by the word love. If he gets rid of the word love, he will be free and unfettered. Let the child be called Wuqing. Yes. Although Zhuo Minghui was dissatisfied with the name, she had no choice but to agree reluctantly. It was easy to change the child's name. He would wait until the child was born and grew up. Where's Qi Meng? Yan Xinglian suddenly thought of something and asked. It wasn't mentioned in the reward order. I think it's fine, Zhuo Minghui replied. What a good kid. It's a pity that Hong Shun doesn't have such luck. Du Shui Shui and Sun Shu know? Xiangyang looked at Yan Xinglian and asked helplessly. The commendation order has just arrived. He said helplessly. I'm afraid they don't know yet. However, according to the disciple who passed down the order, the entire Imperial Thunder sect must know about it. It won't be long before they know about it. Alas, two pitiful children. Zhuo Minghui sighed again. They also have a hard life. As he spoke, helplessly suddenly raised his head and looked outside. Qian Diheng is here. Alas, this child is actually quite close to Xiaohua. Disciple will go and welcome him. Hearing that Qian Diheng had come, helplessly got up and said, Yes, go. He is the legitimate son of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. When Xiaohua was here, he naturally had to entertain him. Now that he's not here, we can't be rude. Helplessly waved his hand. A moment after Xiangyang left, Qian Diheng rushed in from outside the cave like a monkey. As soon as he entered the door, he shouted, Martial Uncle Helplessness, let disciples see the commendation order. Yes, Helplessness couldn't blame Qian Diheng for his rudeness. He handed the jade archive to him. Qian Diheng carefully looked at it. His face was extremely disappointed. He turned his hand and returned the jade archive to Helplessness. He scratched his head and was puzzled. Damn it, how could this guy be gone? Why didn't I feel anything? This guy had always been cautious and could run away. How could he sacrifice his life for righteousness? However, Qian Diheng muttered to himself for a moment. He looked at helplessness and bowed. Martial Uncle Helplessness. When this junior saw the commendation order in the Heavenly Thunder Palace, this junior felt that this matter was a little strange. But as for the specifics, this junior couldn't say. Now that I've seen the Jade Archive personally signed by the sect leader, I still feel that something is wrong. But as for the specifics, this junior couldn't say that. In any case, Xiao Hua is this junior's brother. Although, he may have left, if there's anything in the Myriad Thunder Valley in the future, you could still look for this junior. In addition, this junior had some transactions with Xiao Hua. Now that he's gone, this transaction will be handed over to the Myriad Thunder Valley in the future. Of course, it's still too early to say this, but this junior will say this first. Let Xiao Hua, that guy, blame this junior in the underworld. Damn it, Xiao Hua's gone. How come his senior doesn't feel the slightest bit of grief? Qian Diheng rubbed his eyes. Helplessly, the others were baffled. They didn't know what Qian Diheng was talking about, so they couldn't interrupt. Qian Diheng rubbed his eyes with all his might, but there were still no tears. He could only shrug his shoulders awkwardly and say, I, Qian, have let down that guy Xiao Hua. He's gone, but this senior didn't shed a single drop of fake tears. But just as he said this, a kind of sadness suddenly emerged from his heart. An inexplicable sadness immediately filled Qian Diheng's entire body. Qian Diheng's nose suddenly turned sour, and a few drops of tears flowed out. This senior, Qian Diheng said a few words, turned around, and flew out of the cave. Junior brother Qian, Xiang Yang was anxious and wanted to chase after him. Yin Qinglian grabbed Xiang Yang and said anxiously, Where are you going? Junior brother Qian Xiang Yang was a little stunned. He pointed outside the cave, as if he wanted to distinguish something. Alas, he sighed helplessly and said, Xiao Hua, that little bastard, actually made friends with Qian Diheng, a good brother who treated each other with sincerity. I really didn't expect that the playboy of the Heavenly Thunder Palace was also a true cultivator. Hearing this, Xiang Yang's face turned slightly red. When he heard the news of Xiao Hua and Cui Hongshan's deaths, his mind was filled with disbelief. But when it came to grief and sadness, he really didn't cry. How could he compare to Qian Diheng, who actually had tears streaming down his face? Looking at Xiangzhili again, he was staring at Zhuo Minghui's bulging belly with his small eyes, as if he was curious about how his martial uncle, who he had never seen before, could miraculously come out from inside. As for Xiao Hua's death, he didn't take it seriously at all. Alas, maybe it's because junior brother Xiao, the time he spent in the Myriad Thunder Valley, was too short. Xiang Yang sighed. This familial affection has also faded a lot. Thinking about this, that kind of sadness also slowly came. Xiang Yang's eyes also became a little moist. The matter of Xiao Hua and Cui Hongshan slowly flashed in his mind. At this time, he heard a clear voice from outside. Qian Diheng, what's wrong with you? Why are your eyes so red? Sun Shu is here. Xiang Yang immediately raised his eyes to look at Yin Qinglian. Yin Qinglian hastily got up, and Zhuo Minghui's face became even redder. My eyes were confused by the sand. What's wrong? Have you never been confused before? Qian Diheng's slightly overbearing voice sounded. Haha, senior brother Qian, don't worry too much. Xiao Hua's fine. This smiling voice naturally belonged to Shui. Everyone was stunned. Whether it was Wu Qi and Zhuo Minghui who were sitting on the jade chairs, or Xiang Yang who had already stood up, or even Yin Qinglian who had walked to the door to welcome them, they all showed astonishment on their faces. While they were talking, Shui, Sun Shu, and Qian Diheng walked in. The three of them had different expressions. Qian Diheng's eyes were red, and there was embarrassment on his face. Sun Shu's eyebrows were tightly knitted, and the deep worry on his face was difficult to erase. Looking at Shui again, she had a smile on her face. Although there was a trace of worry in her eyes, there was no sorrow. Yin, Qinglian welcomed the three of them into the cave. Shui Shui and Sun Shu stepped forward to greet Wu Qi and Zhuo Minghui. The two of them also very naturally saw that Zhuo Minghui was pregnant, and both of them changed into smiles to congratulate Zhuo Minghui. Zhuo Minghui lightly bit her lips, and a faint blush appeared on her face. She asked, Shui Shui, what did you say just now? Xiao Hua's fine. How did you know? Then what about Hong Shun? Ha! Good for martial Uncle Zhuo to know. This concubine and Xiao Hua have some connection. Shui Shui smiled and said, this concubine also just heard about the commendation order that was sent to Sun Lei Palace, and knew about Xiao Hua and the others. But this concubine didn't feel that something had happened to Xiao Hua. So, I was afraid that martial Uncle Wu Qi and martial Uncle Zhuo would be worried. So I hurried over with senior sister Sun to inform them. As for martial brother Chui and the others, Shui Shui hesitated and said, this concubine doesn't know, but since Xiao Hua is fine, they must be fine too. Even if something happened to them, Xiao Hua wouldn't ignore it. And, after all, they're the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Martial brother Xiao is the most generous to his own teammates. Sun Shu was still half believing and half doubtful, but she also agreed with absolute certainty. Wu Qi and the others smiled somewhat bitterly. Although, when Xiao Hua met with danger in QC, Shui Shui knew in advance that Xiao Hua would be fine. But this time was different. After all, the commendation order of the head of Heavenly Thunder Palace had already been sent out, and the situation had also been clearly explained. How could Xiao Hua and Chui Hongshun possibly be alive? Wu Qi glanced at Zhuo Minghui, and the two of them suddenly understood, thinking that Shui Shui was comforting them. This concubine also doesn't really believe it. Sun Shu lightly clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, but since Martial's sister Shui is Martial brother Zhao's lover, perhaps she can really sense Martial brother Zhao's safety. You can really sense it? Qian Di Heng didn't believe it. Actually, this concubine already thought about it on the way here. Shui Shui smiled mysteriously and said, it's very simple to prove what this concubine said. Martial Uncle Wu Qi only needs to go to Heavenly Thunder Palace's Jade Archive Hall. Isn't that enough? Chapter 2370. Oh, that's right. Qian Diheng slapped his forehead and exclaimed, I was wondering why I felt that something was wrong. So it's here. Why didn't I think of going to the Jade Archive Hall? After saying that, he didn't stay any longer. Without saying another word, he turned around and flew out of the cave. Xiang Yang followed Qian Diheng to have a look. Helplessness came to his senses and hurriedly shouted, Yes, I'll go now. Xiang Yang's face was equally excited. He quickly caught up and flew into the sky. Martial Uncle Zhe. Shui Shui glanced at Sun Shu. Both of them walked over and chatted with Zhuo Minghui. Although they didn't talk much, Zhuo Minghui's shyness was soon gone. She even whispered to them. In just a few hours, Xiang Yang and Qian Diheng had returned. Damn it, I really shed a few tears for that guy. Qian Diheng cursed. I knew it. That guy has a long life. He won't die just like that. What? Helplessness hurriedly got up and asked, Where's Hong Shun? His natal spiritual tablet. Ah, good, I know. Seeing the anxious look in the cave residence, Xiang Yang smiled and said, I followed junior brother Qian to the Zhenlei Palace and didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall. The Jade Archive Hall of the Zhenlei Palace was closed at the beginning of the Sword Principal battle. Without the sect leader's personal order, no one can enter. Qian Diheng was a little resentful. Even I couldn't enter the Jade Archive Hall. Helplessness listened and his face darkened. He glared at Xiang Yang and scolded. Since you didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall, why are you so happy? Master. Xiang Yang smiled apologetically. I didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall, but I saw Jin Liang who was on duty. What did he say? Did he know that Hongshan's natal spiritual tablet was not damaged? Helplessly, Xiang Yang smiled bitterly and explained, the sect leader also ordered that the disciples on duty in the Jade Archive Hall must report the situation of the natal spiritual tablet to the deacon at any time. He wanted to scold Xiang Yang, but he was too lazy to do so. After talking for so long, he he still didn't know about Shui Hongshun and Xiao Hua's life spirit tablets. Xiangyang, how do you know that Xiao Hua and Shui Hongshun are fine? Zhuo Minghui said with a smile. She knew that Xiangyang was a steady person. If he wasn't certain, he wouldn't be so happy. All right, teacher, mother understands, Xiangyang said. When Jin Liang saw that it was me and junior brother Qian, other than explaining to junior brother Qian who wanted to barge into the Jade Archive Hall, he also smiled and told me something. Oh, Zhuo Minghui asked curiously. What did Jin Liang say? Jin Liang said that as early as a few days ago, the disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace had already come to the Jade Archive Hall and specifically looked at the life spirit tablets of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples. Moreover, they came again yesterday with the sect master's handwritten order in their hands. They had placed special restrictions on the life spirit tablets of some of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples. Other than the sect master, no one else was allowed to look at them. Xiangyang emphasized the words, some of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples, as if Jin Liang was explaining. Fat dog. Qian Diheng curled his lips and sneered. He didn't let me in and even hinted at me from the side. If he didn't say that it was related to my brother, I wouldn't have let him off so easily. Helplessly ignoring Qian Diheng, he pondered for a moment and said cautiously, Xiangyang, are you sure that what Jin Liang said was related to Shui Hongshun and Xiao Hua? Yes, I'm sure. Then, Xiangyang told him about Jin Qing and Xiao Hua. He explained with a smile, junior brother Xiao and Jin Qing got to know each other after a fight. If he saw that junior brother Zhao's natal spiritual tablet was damaged, he would definitely tell me secretly. What he said didn't violate the rules of the Jade Archive Hall, and also told me about the two junior brothers. Yes, I understand. Helplessly sighed in relief. Zhuo Minghui and the others also looked better. However, the sect leader knew that junior brother Xiao and junior brother Chui didn't die, so why did he still give out the reward? Xiangyang asked with a frown. Senior brother Xiang, this is the sect leader's business. Don't make wild guesses if there's nothing important, Qian Diheng said bluntly. Then he bowed to helplessly and said, Martial uncle helplessly, since Xiao Hua didn't die. What I said just now was nonsense. I still have something to do. Goodbye. Good. Xiangyang nodded and said to Xiangyang, help me see the guests out. No need. I'll take my leave now. Qian Diheng nodded to the crowd again, turned around, and left as nimbly as when he came. This guy, Sun Shu, glanced at Qian Diheng's back and said in a low voice, unless Xiao Hua is here, he looks down on everyone. He won't say a word to anyone. Beside him, Xiangyang smiled bitterly and said secretly, what's the meaning of this? You haven't seen how that guy messed around in the Jade Archive Hall. If it weren't for the sect leader's order, he would have really rushed into the Jade Archive Hall. Martial uncle helplessly, are you going to go into seclusion soon? Shui chatted with Zhuo Minghui for a while, then raised her head and asked. Yes, this old man is planning to do so. Helplessly nodded. However, this old man feels a little rushed. There are some things that I haven't prepared yet. By the way, I wonder if Martial Uncle Sun Ming is free? This old man wants to go over and have a chat with her. This is difficult. Shui covered her mouth and smiled. She looked at Sun Shu and said, Master is also in seclusion. She seems to be breaking through the bottleneck of the middle gold core stage. I'm afraid she can't see Martial Uncle. So it's like this. Helplessly said. Martial Uncle, don't worry, Shui said with assurance. Martial Uncle will definitely be able to condense the core this time. This junior has a premonition. Oh, helplessly raised his eyebrows and said with some joy. Really? Of course. Shui nodded and said firmly, this junior has some insignificant premonition, similar to Xiao Hua's matter. Good. Helplessly's heart suddenly felt at ease. He understood in his heart that there were countless strange people in the cultivation world. There were countless cultivators like Shui who had the bloodline of the true spirit and had strange magical abilities. Since she could judge that Xiao Hua was fine one after another, then her premonition towards him shouldn't be a problem. This old woman also wants to go into seclusion in a few months. Zhuo Minghui said with a smile. Shue Shue, do you think this old woman can condense the core? Shue Shue was stunned and then said with a smile, Martial Uncle Zhuo, it's still early for you. No matter what, you should wait until the child is a little older. AI, this old woman has been tied up in the late stage of foundation establishment for many years. If I don't think about condensing the core now, I'm afraid I won't have another chance. Shue Shue glanced at Zhuo Minghui's abdomen and lightly bit her lips. She already faintly understood why Zhuo Minghui was pregnant. She thought for a moment and said with a smile, Martial Uncle Minghui, you worry too much. This junior thinks that Martial Uncle will definitely be able to condense the core in a few years. Really? When Zhuo Minghui heard this, her face was filled with joy like a blooming flower. Shue Shue's face also showed a trace of a smile. The north of Ming country was not yet connected to Huan country. Although it was a little cold, the wind was bleak and the rain was hitting the banana leaves. It was completely different from the cold of Huan country's world of ice and snow. In a gorgeous room, there was a vermilion candlestick. On the candlestick, there was a half-lit red candle. At this time, the red candle still had a flame the size of a thumb. The dripping candle tears accumulated from the top of the red candle all the way to the candlestick. The flame of the candle fluttered and swayed slightly. The entire room, bright and dark, swayed. The bright and dark light shone on the vermilion bed next to it. Through the red embroidered canopy, it fell on a person. Pa! There was a soft sound, as if the candle flame had exploded. At this time, the person on the bed moved slightly. However, it was not this person who took the initiative. It was the person lying next to her who moved. This was a man. This was a man with strong muscles. This man was not an outsider, but Zhang Qingxiao. Zhang Qingxiao gently got up and turned to look at the woman lying next to him. He leaned over and gently kissed the woman's cheek before standing up. Wasn't the person lying on the bed Zhang Yutong? At this time, Zhang Yutong frowned slightly and her eyelashes trembled slightly. Qingxiao, how long are you going to hide this from me? Like sleep talk, like a whisper, and like a complaint, a faintly discernible voice came out from the corner of Zhang Yutong's mouth. What? In the Battle of Jinshan, 7 people from the Imperial Thunder Sect died. Among them were Xiao Hua and He Chuihong Shun. In a quiet room not far from this room, Zhang Qingxiao's face showed a ferocious expression. He held a jade slip in his hand and was roaring at an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Chapter 2371. That cultivator was very surprised, but seeing Zhang Qingxiao angry, he was extremely afraid. He bowed and said, Yes, Lord Sectmaster. When I received the news, I didn't care, but when I saw the 2 people that Sectmaster specially mentioned, I personally sent them over. In just a moment, Zhang Qingxiao had already regained her calm. She nodded and patted that cultivator's shoulder. She smiled and said, Not bad. You did well. Thank you for your praise, Sectmaster. That cultivator was flattered. He patted his hand again and took out another jade slip. He handed it to Zhang Qingxiao and said, This disciple was afraid that Lord Sectmaster had other matters, so I recorded the situation of Jinshan Quan and the map. Zhang Qingxiao was overjoyed. She took the jade slip and patted it again. She took out a token and smiled. Good job. This is a reward from this Sectmaster. Take it and receive your reward. In the future, you must do such things more often. That cultivator's eyes lit up. He took the token and bowed. Thank you, Sectmaster, for your generous gift. This disciple will take his leave. After the disciple left, Zhang Qingxiao impatiently immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. After he read it carefully, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. Stroking his chin with his hand, he whispered to himself, Tens of thousands of swordsmen? At most, it would be Liangjian's cultivation level. Xiaohua wouldn't be in any danger. However, if there were really 30 illusory swordsmen besieging him, damn, this guy, I'm afraid he won't be able to defeat them. But the problem is, how could there be 30 illusory swordsman besieging this guy. Even I can't see through this guy's background. How could others notice him? But on the other hand, this Tu Hong, how could he be so vicious and merciless? He actually killed 70,000 people in a big battle. Under such a big scale, Xiao Huan might really be implicated. Damn it, this guy must be meddling in other people's business and being indecisive. Instead of escaping himself, he wants to save others. No, I have to take a look. Zhang Qingxiao thought for a moment and finally patted her hand to keep the jade slip. She looked at the map of Jinshan Quan again and made a decision. However, just as he was about to put the jade slip away, he smirked. Yutong, why don't you sleep a little longer? You must be tired last night. You don't have to wake up so early, do you? However, even after Zhang Qingxiao said those words, there was still no response. Oh, Yutong, what happened to you? Zhang Qingxiao turned to look at Zhang Yutong. At this moment, Zhang Yutong was not wearing her sword attire. She was only wearing a silk cloth covering her body, revealing the other side of her beauty. What's the matter now? Zhang Yutong stared straight at Zhang Qingxiao and asked softly. Yes, that's right. The sect master sent an order for me to go to Hung Country to investigate a matter. Zhang Qingxiao said without hesitation. Oh, you want to go to Sword Domain? Zhang Yutong's face revealed a burst of joy. Can you take me with you? Zhang Yutong asked timidly. Zhang Qingxiao also shook her head without hesitation. How can that be? If the sect master finds out, I won't be able to keep my life. Is that so? Zhang Yutong's face revealed disappointment. However, she still said softly, Then I understand. Go and do your work. Yutong, Zhang Qingxiao could not bear it and comforted her. Wait a little longer. When the sect master has forgotten about you, I will plead with the sect master. Is the sect master of Heavenly Demon sect so easily moved? Zhang Yutong said coldly. Even if he has forgotten about me, as long as you mention it, won't he know? You have done so many things that he cannot tolerate. Aren't you afraid that he will take your life? I'm not afraid. Zhang Qingxiao flew over and pulled Zhang Yutong into her arms. She said decisively, For you, I am willing to give up my life. Really? Zhang Yutong's voice was a little misty. Her gaze fell on the roof again. Really? Zhang Qingxiao kissed Zhang Yutong's lips and did not forget to answer. That's good. Zhang Yutong's eyes were a little dazed. She murmured, As long as you are sincere to me, anything doesn't matter. Zhang Yutong's delicate body gradually heated up. Zhang Qingxiao did not understand the other meaning in Zhang Yutong's fairy tale. Dozens of days later, in the sky above Golden Spring Mountain, a pitch-black light flashed. Zhang Qingxiao's figure flashed out from the middle. He scanned the surroundings with his divine sense and sniffed. He sneered. As expected, the smell of blood is very strong. The Tao sect prides itself on being righteous and looks down on other cultivators. But when they kill people, they are crazier than others. These 70,000 lives, even I will hesitate for half a day. Yes, it's here. Zhang Qingxiao looked at it for a moment, and then her figure flew down from the sky and fell into the black hole that was 1,000 feet wide. However, in less than an hour, Zhang Qingxiao flew out again with a puzzled look on her face. Damn it, there's so much spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this array. What's shocking is that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is constantly flowing. The spiritual energy is violent and chaotic. Even my demonic sense and divine sense cannot penetrate it. Junior brother Xiao, if you really fell into it, you would have died long ago. Sai, if you die, my Chiu Yin Lu will also have no chance. My life will belong to someone else sooner or later. How can you die? Then, a trace of ruthlessness flashed in Zhang Qingxiao's eyes. His hands moved, but he hesitated and did not hit the ground. Junior brother Xiao, it's not that I don't want to save you. I will risk my life and destroy this array now. But do you still have a life now? If you had died, I'm afraid you would have turned into white bones and a vengeful spirit. If you hadn't died, Zhang Qingxiao thought of this, and her eyes lit up again. She smiled and said, Damn it, I'm so used to being a cultivator that I've forgotten the gatekeeping method of the heavenly demon sect." As he said, Zhang Qingxiao scanned with his divine sense. He did not see any trace of cultivators. His figure flashed and fell into the black hole again. He patted his hand and took out a palm-sized blood-red banner from his storage bag. Zhang Qingxiao chanted a mantra, and a dark green flame gradually appeared in his right hand. When he slapped the banner with his hand, a thick black smoke rose from the banner. "Go!" Zhang Qingxiao waved the banner in his hand. The black smoke turned into a wisp and drilled into the array underground. However, when the black smoke came into contact with the array, it immediately boiled and bubbled like boiling water. It could not penetrate the array at all. Zhang Qingxiao's face was a little ugly. "Damn it! What kind of array did Tu Hong set up? Even my heavenly demon sex technique can't penetrate it. I can clearly feel that there are countless resentful spirits in the array. They are all sword cultivators and cultivators with resentment who were killed by Tu Hong, but I can't find out anything." Chapter 2372. Someone's coming. Zhang Qingxiao raised her eyebrows and kept the long banner. With a flash of her body, as though she was tearing the void apart, she disappeared into the black hole. Not long after, she saw a few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators sneakily flying over. Similarly, they landed in the black hole and used all sorts of secret techniques in an attempt to break the array. If you guys can break it, even I would be laughing. Zhang Qingxiao popped out half of her head to take a look and sneered. "It's your fortune if you guys can't break it. If you do, the first ones to lose your lives will be you guys." Following which, the corner of Zhang Qingxiao's mouth twitched again. She stretched out her hand and took out dozens of fireball talismans and threw them into the air. Rumble! A loud sound was heard, and Zhang Qingxiao's voice screamed again. "Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones. Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones. Quick, let's go take a look." From afar, a group of 6th-grade swordsmen were patrolling. Hearing the commotion at Spring Jinshan, they immediately flew over on their swords. As for the few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators in the black hole, they all rushed out from the hole with a black face. Using their spiritual senses, they saw many swordsmen flying over and were all shocked. Without saying anything, they scattered and fled in all directions like stray dogs. Zhang Qingxiao had already flown far away. Seeing the group of Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators being chased, she laughed so hard that she clutched her stomach and fell into the air. She laughed so hard that tears were about to fall. Time passed very quickly. Day after day, month after month. Closing one's eyes and opening one's eyes would be a night. Opening one's eyes and closing one's eyes would be a day. Sometimes, after closing one's eyes, one would not be able to open them again. Sometimes, even if one opened one's eyes, one would not be able to see the next day's sun. 5 years passed in a blink of an eye. The war between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators continued to expand. The flames of war burned the borders of Huan country, Shi country, and Meng country. Sometimes it would penetrate deep into Huan country. Sometimes it would penetrate deep into Shi country and Meng country. Furthermore, just like in the previous battles, the Dao sect was overwhelmed at the start and was not prepared enough. Under the deliberate planning of the sword cultivators, they were always at a disadvantage. However, as the cultivators gradually gained a foothold and adapted to the attacks of the sword cultivators, especially when they were even more shameless than the sword cultivators, this disadvantage was reversed. Both sides were once again in a stalemate. This stalemate was very similar to the glue between lovers. Wherever there were cultivators, there would definitely be swordsmen. And wherever there were swordsmen, there would definitely be cultivators. During this period, there were several famous battles, and both sides had their victories and defeats. However, these big battles were not as loud as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, nor were the casualties as heavy as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain. The Golden Core cultivators in the meeting hall, in terms of cultivation, were all outstanding. But in terms of military strategy, how could they be Tu Hong's opponent. Even if they were to stack up, they would not be able to match up to Tu Hong. In these few battles, the victories were all due to Tu Hong's planning. The losses were all due to Tu Hong's compromises. Tu Hong's position in the meeting hall was getting more and more important. The so-called daily duty was just a figurehead. Almost all the key military affairs, the Golden Core cultivators on duty would seek Tu Hong's opinion. Without his opinion, the hearts of the Golden Core cultivators would be empty. Although these Golden Core cultivators were filled with jealousy, but they had no choice. Seeing the rise of Tu Hong, Imperial Thunder Sect's Qian Mo was happy. Because Tu Hong's attitude towards him was obviously different from the other cultivators. Tu Hong was cautious and respectful, subtly raising Qian Mo by half a head. Qian Mo naturally knew what Tu Hong was thinking. Moreover, the 5-year agreement between Imperial Thunder Sect and Sky Patrol City was coming to an end. Tu Hong and Dui Qiming's dual cultivation ceremony was already on the agenda. In these 5 years, Dui Qiming did not participate in any battles. She had always been meditating in the Imperial Thunder Sect's encampment. The place where she, Ming Mao, and Dui Ling lived was still the same as before. As time passed, Ming Mao and Dui Ling returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Only Dui Qiming lived alone in the secluded place. Tu Hong often came to visit and informed her of the battles in Sky Patrol City. Dui Qiming was still reserved at first, but gradually she accepted it. Now that the dual cultivation ceremony was about to be held, Dui Qiming was considering whether to move to Tu Hong's residence. According to Qian Mo's observation, at the very beginning, Dui Qiming was still a little gloomy. She would always secretly cry, but as time passed, her tears turned into lamentation, and lamentation turned into hidden bitterness. In the end, the bitterness disappeared, leaving behind only a faint contemplation on her brows. This faint contemplation showed Dui Qiming's temperament, making it easier for people to feel tender affection for her. Hee time? It's the world's best healing spirit pill. No matter if it's the physical body or the heart, it's always effective. Qian Mo couldn't help but praise Tu Hong's brilliance in his heart. Everything in Sky Patrol City and Sword Domain could not change the grand array of Golden Spring Mountain. As the battle spread, the cultivators and swordsmen seemed to have forgotten about Golden Spring Mountain. They also seemed to have forgotten about the flying swords and treasures of the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators within the Grand Array. The Grand Array of Golden Spring Mountain seemed to have become a huge mystery buried deep under Golden Spring Mountain. It would only be revealed 10 years later when the nascent soul cultivators entered the battle. However, what everyone didn't expect was that within this unsolvable mystery, there was a fierce Xiaohua. In these 5 years, he cultivated with all his might, refining the almost endless heaven and earth spiritual qi, constantly avoiding the fate of being destroyed by the heaven and earth spiritual qi at any time. As Xiaohua cultivated bitterly, as Xiaohua was struck by the spirit qi again and again, his cultivation also advanced by leaps and bounds. At this time, he was already close to the peak of Foundation Establishment late stage. Although Ling Yunwu and the other 12 swordsmen transformed into 12 flying swords, the 7 Stars Grand Array that imprisoned Xiao Hua still existed. And because Ling Yunwu and the other swordsmen transformed into flying swords, the power of imprisonment was even stronger and tighter. Of course, with the passage of time, although the power of imprisonment did not weaken, under Xiao Hua's cultivation of Foundation Establishment late stage, it had already loosened. In the end, when Xiao Hua was already able to resist the attacks of the spirit qi, he even tried to break the 7 Stars Grand Array. However, Xiao Hua only dabbled in it and did not really use his full strength. After all, to be so quiet, or to be forced to cultivate by the spirit qi, to Xiao Hua, was something that could only be encountered by chance and not sought after. He almost wanted to condense his core or absorb all the spirit qi in the Grand Array before coming out of seclusion. After all, Xiaohua was clear in his heart that the amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi he needed for cultivation was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. The green spirit pill he used to advance from Foundation Establishment Late Stage to Foundation Establishment Late Stage was probably enough for a nascent soul cultivator to advance from initial stage to intermediate stage. It would be a waste if he did not take advantage of such a great opportunity. However, since entering the peak of Foundation Establishment Late Stage, Xiaohua could no longer cultivate in peace. It was like a small thorn in his heart. It was not big, but it made him uncomfortable. If he paid attention to it, he could not find any trace of it at all. Is it possible that there is another cause and effect? Or is it because I can't condense my core without Lingli pill? Xiaohua was not very surprised. Although this feeling was not as strong as when he was looking for Dai in Century City, it was obvious that there was another cause and effect waiting for Xiaohua to resolve. He could no longer stay here to cultivate. Forget it. Xiaohua opened his eyes, turned his neck, and secretly said, "My seclusion, well, it's a real seclusion of death. I'm afraid that the masters of Thunder Controlling Sect will think that I and others have died. Oh, it's bad, isn't it?" Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly realized that it was not a big deal for him to cultivate in seclusion, but wouldn't the Thunder Controlling Sect and the Myriad Thunder Valley be turned upside down? Wouldn't Shui be sad? Even if Hongxia Fairy heard it, she would also be sad. Well, it's this kind of cause and effect. Xiaohua nodded, and his divine thoughts swept through the phoenix celestial body that wrapped his whole body. At this time, the celestial body was more than 100 feet larger, reaching more than 400 feet. Inside the celestial body, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had condensed into a needle-like crystal pillar. It was surrounded by the netherworld wind, and there was a layer of ink sand on it. These crystal thorns were extremely small, and they rotated at a high speed. Hundreds of thousands of crystal thorns clustered together, forming a funnel-shaped vortex. These vortexes were densely packed, and there were countless of them, covering the phoenix celestial body. However, if one took a closer look, there were still some patterns. There were 132 million small areas, and each area revolved around an imaginary point. These 132 million small crystal spikes revolved in the same pattern, and the pace of their rotation was also the same. However, under the impact of the spirit howl, these 132 million crystal thorns slowly rotated within the phoenix celestial body. Xiaohua used his primordial spirit to sense the changes in the celestial body, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, where did this incomplete jade slip come from to the Dawn Rain continent? This is obviously not the path of cultivation of the Dao sect. If one looks at the rotation of these 132 million crystal thorns, it is actually somewhat similar to the Star Dao of the Xian Kong Pavilion. It's a pity that this cultivation technique is incomplete and the space for improvement is limited. As for how far this celestial body can cultivate in the future, it will depend on this young master's luck. What does this young master lack? Maybe spirit stones, maybe pills, maybe cultivation techniques, but what about luck? This young master has never lacked anything. Xiaohua couldn't help but think of the auspicious jade talisman that he kept close to his body. However, since this cultivation technique needs to be cleansed with spiritual energy at the beginning, the threshold is really too high. If I want to cultivate in the future, I'm afraid that the conditions will be even more terrible, right? This kind of thing that scares this young master to death. It's better not to come to it. Chapter 2373. How are Cui Hongshun and these 6 dumb birds? Xiaohua thought as his mind entered the space again. Cui Hongshun and the other 5 were still lying casually on the ground and hadn't woken up. They were exactly the same as when they had been sent in 5 years ago. The only difference was that Little Silver, who had been berated by Little Yellow to watch over the 6 people, was now jumping from one person to another, and then from another to another. The hair on their heads had been messed up by little silver, and there were even some bald spots. Damn it! How am I supposed to explain this to these people? Xiaohua was both angry and amused. Little Silver was jumping happily on the 6 people. Sensing Xiaohua's mind, he immediately stopped and stood on the tip of Cui Hongshan's nose. He raised his little head and looked up at the sky with his mouse eyes. His 2 pink little paws were clasped in front of his chest, and his little tail swayed casually in front of Cui Hongshan's eyes. Little Yellow, let Little Silver go back, Xiaohua said to Little Yellow, who was already a little clear-headed. Got it, Mother. Little Yellow's voice was still a little lazy. Little Silver then ran around the 6 people like a puff of smoke and plucked a few more strands of their hair from his little paws. He then quickly ran across the ground and rushed into his own spirit field. What's so fun about this hair? Xiaohua was speechless. Mother, is this that little girl? Little Yellow suddenly asked. Xiaohua naturally knew that Little Yellow was talking about that big injured duck. It should be. Mother can't be sure. Boy knows, her aura is that little girl's. Little Yellow yawned and said in his heart, but she's seriously injured, and her life force is still a little weak. Life force? You know about life force? Xiaohua was a little astonished. In his heart, Little Yellow was just a little thing that didn't know anything. Boy can think of something as he sleeps, as if it's already in the boy's mind. This way, your child will slowly understand. Goldie himself was also puzzled. My goodness, what kind of spirit beast is this? Xiaohua was secretly surprised. However, he exhorted, this Dai has done us a great favor. You watch her carefully. If there's any abnormality, quickly call Mother. I know, Mother, Goldie said disapprovingly. That situation was no different from a rebellious child. Have you grown up? Xiaohua also felt helpless when he heard the same helpless tone as himself. Xiaohua's mind left the space. He shrugged his shoulders slightly and took the Phoenix Dharma body back into his body. Immediately, another wave of spiritual pressure came crashing over. Xiaohua felt his body tighten. His meridians and corporeal body were filled with an extremely large amount of heaven and earth spirit qi. He had no choice but to mobilize a few more primordial spirits to refine the heaven and earth spirit qi. Thanks to the Phoenix Dharma body, as Xiaohua refined the spiritual energy, he sighed. Otherwise, this young master would have already turned into a vengeful spirit 5 years ago. Thinking of the vengeful spirits, Xiaohua's ears once again produced a mournful sound. Although this sound was covered by the tide of spiritual pressure, a strange kind of fear naturally arose from Xiaohua's heart. Needless to say, Xiaohua understood in his heart. This is the unyielding spirit of those cultivators and swordsmen that Tu Hong killed. Forget it, this is also one of this young master's merits. I just don't know if the Buddha's relic can be affected by the spiritual pressure. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, then carefully released the Buddha's relic. Within the spiritual pressure of the Buddha's relic, that golden light flourished, illuminating the surroundings. The vengeful spirits that had faded into the smoke seemed to have seen the beauty of heaven and earth, and swarmed forward like a swarm of bees. Seeing that the Buddha's relic was not affected by the spiritual pressure, Xiaohua inwardly nodded, then secretly laughed. Of course, the vengeful spirits are not afraid of the spiritual pressure, so the Buddha's relic is even less afraid. Immediately after, Xiaohua did not hesitate. The Buddha's relic chanted the 9 syllables of truth, and the brilliant golden descend. Characters flew out from the Buddha's mouth one by one, landing on each of the vengeful spirits. Those vengeful spirits were originally the vengeful spirits of cultivators and swordsmen, and were filled with unyielding and injustice. When the army character landed on them, a wisp of green smoke immediately flew out from their bodies, and their entire souls became clear. Those souls once again transformed into human form, bowed towards the Buddha's relic, and said, "Many thanks to the Venerable One," then immediately disappeared. and that wisp of green smoke also floated within the spiritual pressure, disappearing without a trace. However, at the same time that it disappeared, an even smaller blood-like thing that even Buddha's sense could not detect fell into Xiaohua's Buddha's heart. It turned into the Buddha's fire, and on top of the Buddha's fire, there was a small red that rushed into the tempering of the execution dream. Xiaohua originally wanted to do merits, but he did not expect that once he did it, he would not be able to stop, and it was delayed for dozens of days. Damn it, this Tu Hong has really committed a great sin. I'm afraid there are close to 100,000 vengeful spirits. In the end, Xiaohua himself was somewhat angry. He originally thought that it would be good if there were a few thousand, but who would have thought that it would actually increase by 10 times? Moreover, these vengeful spirits actually did not leave, and all of them stayed here, clearly harboring resentment towards Tu Hong. Sigh. If I think about it again, swordsmen are vicious. If this guy did not hold back, if he did not act so ruthlessly, the cultivators would also suffer heavy casualties. Xiaohua was the most sympathetic towards the suffering of others, and he only needed to put himself in their shoes to immediately understand the difficulties within. In the end, this is a great sword battle. Although these vengeful spirits are pitiful, there is nothing that can be done about it. Who told the sword cultivators to start this great battle? Naturally, this young master can ignore this kind of haggling. However, Tu Hong directly placed my thunder-controlling sect's first small team inside the Great Formation, making it clear that he wants the lives of the 7 of us. No matter what the other cultivators do, we will definitely lose our lives. This karma, this young master will not let it go. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. But why'd he do this? Could it be that he received instructions from someone else? It's possible. Maybe Tu Hong and that old ghost Jing Ru have some kind of friendship. In that case, this young master has implicated Cui Hongshun and the others. Xiaohua sighed. In these 5 years, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, while Cui Hongshun and the other 4 had been unconscious for an entire 5 years. Xiaohua still felt a bit guilty in his heart. Let's talk about it when there's a chance in the future. Xiaohua thought to himself, even if there's no benefit, at least we still manage to hold on to our lives, right? You can't resent this young master. Xiaohua was finding excuses for himself again. After waiting for the last vengeful spirit to finish transcending, Xiaohua was a bit bewildered. That's not right. That female swordsman soul is still here, but the other 12... No, the other 20 swordsman souls are not here. Could it be that their souls have already dissipated? Or are they inside the flying sword? Chapter 2374. Xiaohua didn't have any feelings for Ling Yunwu and the others. If it weren't for them, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such an opportunity. Since he didn't see the souls of these swordsmen, he was naturally puzzled. Well, even if they are in the flying swords, they have already turned into sword spirits. How can I be afraid of them? Thinking about it, Xiaohua put away the Buddha's saraira and waved his hand, holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. Xiaohua tried his best to hit the staff in midair. With a loud bang, the power of the 7 stars array was loosened by the wishful steel staff. Not in the 5 elements, Xiaohua snorted coldly. This wishful steel staff is really powerful. It directly attacks the power of imprisonment. It's really something that other magic weapons can't do. Now that he had a treasure like the wishful steel staff, Xiaohua's strength had a place to be used. He raised the wishful steel staff with both hands and struck the power of the 7 stars great array, breaking it little by little. Since the 7 stars array was the secret technique of the Ling Feng sword sect, it must be incomparably powerful. If there was a swordsman presiding over it, it might not be so easy for Xiaohua to break it. Unfortunately, there were only 12 flying swords. They were dead objects. Even if there were sword spirits in the flying swords, how could they control the array? In less than half an hour, the 7 stars array was broken by the incomparably brave Xiao Hua with a wishful steel staff. As the array was broken, the 12 flying swords wailed at the same time, and were about to leave the air. You still want to leave at this time? What wishful thinking! Xiao Hua sneered and waved his big sleeve. The 12 flying swords were imprisoned by him. They obediently stopped in midair. Collect! Xiao Hua waved his sleeve, and the 12 flying swords fell into the space. Then, Xiao Hua took out the sword from the sword pouch and let his primordial spirit comprehend it. His figure swayed slightly and was about to fly to the ground. However, just as he moved, the spiritual energy swarmed into his body, scaring him. Oh, so that's how it is. This spiritual energy is so powerful. The more you want to escape, the more it will enter. I'm afraid that the vast majority of cultivators and swordsmen will explode like this. Thus, Xiao Hua hurriedly stopped and released the Phoenix Dharma body to block the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He tried his best to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that entered his body. Forget it, let's just slowly move. After Xiao Hua finished refining his spiritual energy, he didn't dare to be rash and slowly moved towards the edge of the underground Great Formation. Oh, what's this? Xiao Hua had just flown for a moment when he discovered a sawtooth flying sword in front of him. Oh, motherfucker. I've been running for my life for so long that I've turned stupid. Xiao Hua immediately realized, if those 12 sword cultivators can transform into flying swords, then the other swordsmen can naturally do the same. The flying swords transformed by the illusory swordsmen are extremely precious. Needless to say, the greedy Xiao Hua began to search again. However, there were more surprises to come. Gradually, Xiao Hua realized that not only were there sword cultivators flying swords, there were also many Dharma treasures of Dao sect cultivators that were left unscathed in the soil. Xiao Hua, who was wild with joy, was so happy that he scratched his ears and cheeks. It was as if he was picking up treasures. He kept them all in his space. However, when he calmed down a little, Xiao Hua remembered, I can't take them all. I still have to go out from here in a while and return to Sky Patrol City. If I loot everything here, how can I explain it? After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua found the main point of his search. He didn't want ordinary Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, and he didn't care about ordinary flying swords either. However, after another hour, Xiao Hua was in trouble. Which Dharma treasure or Dharma artifact that could avoid the attack of the spirit howl was easy to obtain? Xiao Hua picked up this one and threw that one away. Every one of them made his heart bleed. Who cares? I took it, so what? Who can make me spit it out? Xiao Hua was ruthless. Even if that old ghost Jing Ru comes now, I can easily escape, right? Thinking of this, the 2 Dharma treasures in his hands disappeared and were sent into his space. Who cares about them? In fact, it was ridiculous to say that these Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, Xiao Hua couldn't use most of them. However, Xiao Hua liked them and just wanted to keep them for himself. There was no other reason. It was his nature. Thinking about it, it took Xiao Hua a few days to pick up the items of 100,000 cultivators and swordsmen. Among them, he only picked up the ones that were in good condition and threw away the ones that he didn't care about. When Xiao Hua wobbled from the bottom of the great array to the top, and from the left to the right, there were so many things in this space. Xiao Hua wobbled and laughed foolishly. It was really a blessing for fools. Not only Dharma treasures and flying swords, Xiao Hua also picked up a lot of sword slips. Even like Ling Yunwu, Xiao Hua picked up 6 of the illusory swordsmen's transformed flying swords, making a total of 18 swords. What made Xiao Hua the happiest was that he didn't know which sword cultivator's storage bag it came from, but there was actually a white bone palm that matched the huge skeleton in his space. Speaking of which, it took Xiao Hua more than 10 days to walk through the entire great array and collect all the essences. Then, he slowly and leisurely headed towards the ground. When he arrived at the edge of the great array, he used his divine sense to carefully examine it, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously revealed a smile. This edge was different from before it wasn't that kind of tyrannical and unstable restriction. Instead, it was a kind of sturdy restriction. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and used his transcendence vision to look and found the weak point of the restriction. Without hesitation, he took out the rabbit talisman and imbued it with his transcendence energy. When several rabbit talismans were embedded into the spirit array, the edges of the spirit array began to change. The previously stable restriction began to show signs of loosening. Once these signs of loosening appeared, it immediately became like a whirlwind that swept away the clouds. It could no longer be contained. This is bad. When Xiao Hua saw this, he immediately understood. Although the edge of the array was stable, and the place he had touched was only a small corner, it had already caused the entire array to lose its balance. The loss of balance at the edge of the array wasn't a big deal. The key was that the spiritual howl within the array was constantly washing over it. Although 5 years had already passed, the spiritual howl hadn't even subsided by 20%. Once the edge of the array lost its balance, the spiritual howl immediately increased and rushed towards Xiao Hua's location like a swarm of bees. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hastily summoned his phoenix Dharma body, and with a wave of his hand, he collected several rabbit talismans. Wong! A thunderous howl resounded from within the array. The stirred-up spiritual howl came from behind Xiao Hua, and from every possible direction, slapped towards the loosened edge of the array. Xiao Hua could only summon his phoenix Dharma body, and at the same time the crystal thorns in his body rapidly revolved. He also activated his mental cultivation method and secret technique, and did his utmost to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Woo! Boom! With merely a huge impact, the edge of the array was broken, and with a sound like a chain, the entire array completely collapsed. In an instant, an incomparably powerful force was born from within the spirit stone mine of MT Springgold. With a thunderous momentum, it slapped towards the surroundings, rushed into the air, and rushed towards the ground. Boom! As if a dozen nascent soul cultivators had joined forces to attack. MT Springgold trembled, and countless mountain rocks and dust rushed into the sky, and countless dust fragments spread in all directions. The entire heaven and earth was completely covered by the dust. That incomparably pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth also instantly filled the area within a radius of several li. Furthermore, it spread towards the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. In merely an instant, a deep pit of several li in size formed within MT Springgold. Woo! Following closely, countless hurricanes accompanied by the diffusion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed in the surroundings of MT Springgold. All the trees, snow, mountain rocks, and other things within 100 li were swept up into the sky and were thrown far away. What's going on? Just as the array exploded, in the air, several li away from MT Springgold, there were 2 groups of disciples patrolling. One group was made up of Tao sect disciples, and the other group was made up of sword cultivators. All of them were in the middle stage of foundation establishment. A Tao sect cultivator at the peak of the middle stage of foundation establishment suddenly felt that something was amiss. Just as he had the time to shout out, the hurricane attacked him, and a powerful force swept through his body. It was extremely barbaric and also extremely easy to tear him into pieces. There was simply no room for resistance. The other dozen cultivators were even more miserable. Before they could even think, they were swept up by the hurricane, and just as they were blown a few feet into the air, they were immediately torn apart. The group of sword cultivators were slightly stronger than the other cultivators. Their bodies were sturdy, and the flying swords under their feet were also fast. Unfortunately, they were only able to fly for several tens of li before they were pulled down from their flying swords by a powerful and chaotic force. They were forcefully thrown into the hurricane. The most pitiful one was a level 5 swordsman. Although he tried his best to control the flying sword to fly, there was still a broken flying sword in the hurricane. The huge force blew the flying sword upside down and directly penetrated the swordsman's chest with the sword hilt. It did not stop for a moment at all and rushed into the air with a whistling sound. It flew straight into the mountain rock 1,000 feet away and only stopped after it was inserted for hundreds of feet. With such a powerful force, it was no wonder that Tu Hong was so calm. He was absolutely not afraid that someone would break the array. Even a nascent soul cultivator would find it difficult to protect himself from such a huge explosion of spiritual qi, right? Unfortunately, no matter how much he calculated, he still missed out on one. That was Xiao Hua, who was breaking the array within the array. The inside of the array was completely different from the outside. Although it was only the boundary of the array, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. When the array collapsed, Xiao Hua tried his best to escape into the array, using the Phoenix Dharma body to protect his body. When he could no longer resist the force of the explosion of spiritual qi, he stopped resisting and rushed out of the array along with the hurricane produced by the spiritual qi. Moreover, Xiao Hua was breaking the array from the bottom. His figure followed the hurricane and rushed straight into the sky. Xiao Hua's figure gradually accelerated. Those magic treasures and flying sword that were enough to kill golden core cultivators were the same speed as him, and some were even in front of him. They simply did not pose any threat to him. Chapter 2375. These 7 people came from the direction of Mt. Chuanjin's array. Zhang Xian immediately understood and shouted, "They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiao Hua and the others out from the foothills. "Damn it! Can't you be a bit more gentle?" Xiao Hua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, wouldn't that pull have injured my tendons and bones? I don't even know how to save people. Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths. Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, "We do have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many." "That's not right, Senior brother Zhang. This is the Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." Another clever disciple discovered, "The patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley." Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up and hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiao Hua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. "That's right, it's the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiao Hua. I recognize these 7 people. They're the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the battle of Mt. Quanjin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This is a greater contribution than magic treasures." Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiao Hua and the others. After everyone had consumed the elixir, Zhang Xian's heart was slightly at ease. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiao Hua had previously used. "These 7 people are seriously injured and cannot be moved for the time being. We will first place the 7 people in the cave and leave 1 person to guard it. The others will follow this poor Taoist to search inside." Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiao Hua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiao Hua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiao Hua and the others, Zhang Xian once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring Mountain Range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Quanjin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Quanjin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Xian and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring mountain range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring mountain range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Xian was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiaohua, who was lucky enough to survive. Sigh, why is there such a big difference between people? This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Xian and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator scanned the crater with his spiritual sense, Zhang Xian immediately left with his disciples. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Xian and the rest returned to the cave, the two people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiaohua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Xian's return, Xiaohua, Cui Hongshan, and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Xian and the rest, Cui Hongshan was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain Spiritual Stone Mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction? Xiaohua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Xian, he hesitated and said, Are you fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction? Hee, junior brother Xiao, of course it's me. Zhang Xian looked at Xiaohua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, I am Zhang Xian, who participated in the Taiching sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever. Sigh, it's nothing. Xiaohua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongshan, and asked again, Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain Spiritual Stone Mine? What happened to me and the rest? Junior brother Xiao. Zhang Xian looked at Xiaohua, then looked at Cui Hongshan and the rest, who were confused, and said with a smile, This must be Captain Cui Hongshan, right? Cui Hongshan nodded and said, That's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction. Nice to meet you. It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way, I'll explain it slowly. Zhang Xian thought for a while and said, Okay. Xiaohua nodded, but Cui Hongshan frowned and said, Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? And we just recovered from our injuries? Zhang Xian laughed softly. The Golden Spring Mountain Spiritual Stone Mine no longer exists. As for how Brother Cui got injured, I don't know. However, when I saw all of you, your lives were hanging by a thread. Fortunately, although your injuries are serious, they're all on the skin and flesh. Your meridians and dantian are still intact. You'll naturally recover in these few days. Fellow Taoists, you're all lucky. Sigh, thinking about some of our friends. As he spoke, Zhang Xian's face paled. Oh. Xiaohua understood and said softly, Senior brother Zhang, senior brother Yang Fangsheng. It seems like, junior brother Xiao has met senior brother Yang before, right? Yes, and senior brother He Fang Yuan from Taiching sect, and senior brother Ku Xingxi from Kunlun sect. They're all old friends of mine. Sigh. Only senior brother He Fang Yuan was lucky enough to escape from Golden Spring Mountain and has returned to Taiching sect now. Zhang Xian sighed. I only heard about him 5 years ago. I haven't heard about him for the past few years. 5 years ago? Senior brother Zhang, what do you mean? Zhen Minghui was baffled and asked unconsciously. Ha. Zhang Xian stood up and said, Let's go. Now that Golden Spring Mountain's formation has unexpectedly exploded, it attracted many cultivators and swordsmen. We should hurry back to patrol Heaven City. Golden Spring Mountain's formation? What's going on? Cui Hongshan was puzzled, but immediately after, his face showed a trace of shock as he looked at Zhen Minghui and said, Senior brother Minghui, The formation that senior brother Zhang mentioned, is it that layer of restriction? Chapter 2376. After exiting the formation, there was no more heaven and earth spiritual qi attacking Xiao Hua's body and meridians. Xiao Hua's body relaxed, and with a long roar, he somersaulted in the air. The phoenix celestial body spread its wings and flew along the side of the hurricane. After waiting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the phoenix celestial body flew to the edge of the hurricane with a loud and clear cry. The phoenix celestial body spread its 400 zhang wings and carried Xiao Hua out of the hurricane with ease. Outside the hurricane was naturally 1,000 zhang high in the sky, and the wind was biting cold. A thin layer of golden light naturally appeared around Xiao Hua's body, protecting his entire body. Roar outside the hurricane, the world was vast, and the boundless snow was in sight. Xiao Hua couldn't help but let out a long roar. The world was so big, and everything was under his control. Xiao Hua's heart was instantly filled with the feeling of being free and unfettered. Good boy. After flying for a while, Xiao Hua withdrew the phoenix celestial body and spread out his divine sense. When he saw that all the living things within 100 li were killed, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After thinking for a while, he understood the clues, and he felt even more lucky. Then, Xiao Hua looked at the huge pit in the Golden Spring mountain range, and his mind spun rapidly, thinking of how to explain the reason why he and Cui Hongshen were able to survive. I'm afraid that's the only way. Xiao Hua thought for a while and came up with a plan. His body turned in a circle in midair, and with a thunderous roar, he flew towards the west. After flying for a few dozen miles, they arrived at a steep mountain range. At this time, there was no snow on the mountain range, and the forest was also destroyed. On the bare foot of the mountain, there was a small cave in front of them. Xiao Hua laughed and pointed with his hand. This is the place. Thus, Xiao Hua flew into the cave, sat down cross-legged, and took out the Buddha Sarira. After that, he pulled Cui Hongshen and the others out of the space, erasing their memories one by one, and even slightly changing some things. After waiting for half an hour, Xiao Hua proudly came out of the cave. Then, Xiao Hua flew in midair and thought for a while. He looked around and even pinched his chin. When his brows relaxed, he grabbed Cui Hongshan from the space again and hit him with a hand seal. Then, without hesitation, he used his strength to smash Cui Hongshan into the mountain range. Rumble, Cui Hongshan's body smashed into the mountain range and made a huge sound. Light flashed around his body, and his body was embedded in the mountain range. He smashed more than 10 zhang. Haha, it's so refreshing. If Cui Hongshan's father, Cui Hongshan will be angry. Xiao Hua clapped his hands, and his divine sense swept past Cui Hongshan. He saw that although Cui Hongshan was already heavily injured, it was not enough to take his life. Xiao Hua Xiao had to do it. Xiao. Xiao Hua was with Zhao's Xiao of the same. Finally, Xiao Hua himself was the same. He screamed in midair and rushed into the mountain range. 7 human-shaped caves were formed at the foot of the mountain. Zhang Xin was a disciple of the Utopia faction in the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He was short and had an ordinary appearance. As a cultivator, appearance and figure were secondary. As long as your cultivation was high, who would dare to look down on you? Unfortunately, Zhang Xion's aptitude was just like his figure and appearance. He was too ordinary. When he was cultivating qi, he narrowly passed the Utopia faction's disciple selection and became a cultivator. Now that he had the conditions to cultivate, Zhang Xian was full of energy and wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. However, there were no shortcuts in cultivation. If you didn't have the aptitude, you couldn't do it. Even if you didn't sleep every day and cultivated all the time, you couldn't compare with those with good aptitude. In the Utopia faction, Li Zongbao was a typical example. Zhang Xian joined the Utopia faction with Li Zongbao. However, Li Zongbao easily reached the Foundation Establishment stage, and even reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment stage. Zhang Xian was still stuck at the peak of level 12 of the Qi refining stage, and couldn't reach the Foundation Establishment stage for a long time. Fortunately, Zhang Xian worked hard and earned an opportunity to participate in the Feather Deity Conference. However, the result was not out of his expectations. Although he was ranked in the top 32, he was shocked again in the competition for the extraterrestrial divine object. It turned out that on the Dawn Rain continent, except for Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction, he couldn't compare with Yun Guichong of the Washflower sect and Hongxia Fairy. Even Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder sect, who didn't enter the top 32, was far behind him. Needless to say, he retreated helplessly in the face of Yun Guichong's magic weapon. Needless to say, he was extremely surprised by Hongxia Fairy's betrayal. Needless to say, Yun Guichong and Hongxia Fairy had both reached the peak of the Qi refining stage and only wanted to reach the completion of the Qi refining stage with the help of the Soul Accumulation Talisman. He just remembered that he had seen Xiao Hua's amazing strength with his own eyes. He actually took out the Great Wisdom Sword. His heart had been trembling for more than 10 years. How could there be such a big difference between people? This thought, even after he had reached the Foundation Establishment stage, it still lingered in his heart. Even when the Great War of Tao cultivators began, he, who hadn't broken through the Foundation Establishment stage for a long time, was selected to join the expedition together with Yang Fangsheng. He still didn't get rid of this thought. However, 5 years ago, he suddenly woke up. Yes, there is such a big difference between people. Opportunities are always different. However, no matter what the difference is, no matter what the opportunity is, as long as one is alive, there is a chance. This was because Yang Fangsheng, who had been sent to the expedition together with him, had died in the Battle of Mount Quanjin. Not even his corpse was left behind. Thinking of Yang Fangsheng, Zhang Xian felt a little sad. Yang Fangsheng's experience was very similar to his. The two of them had even participated in the Feather Immortal Conference together. This time, the two of them were together in the expedition. However, Yang Fangsheng was more mature than Zhang Xian. He didn't complain as much as Zhang Xian. He just cultivated diligently. After hearing the news of Yang Fangsheng's death, the first thing Zhang Xian did was to apply for a mission from the deacon. He was to bring his team of 9 disciples to patrol Mount Quanjin, hoping to find Yang Fangsheng's corpse. Of course, patrolling Mount Quanjin wasn't an easy task. Every sect had a chance, and even every team had a chance. However, Zhang Xian knew that other than himself, who sincerely wanted to find Yang Fangsheng's corpse, most of the other teams were here for the magic treasures in the array. Today was the day that the Utopia faction would replace the Cool Breeze Valley team. Zhang Xian brought his team and set off a few days earlier. Just when they were a few hundred miles away from Mount Quanjin, they encountered the rupture of the array. There was an earth-shattering sound, and there was a strange phenomenon of a hurricane soaring into the sky. Even from a few hundred miles away, there was a pressure of spiritual energy fluctuations. Zhang Xian's first reaction was that there was a problem with the array of Mount Quanjin. He sent 2 of his disciples back to report the news, while he urged the rest of his disciples to follow him and rush towards Mount Quanjin. When Zhang Xian arrived within a few hundred miles of Mount Quanjin, the impact of the explosion of heaven and earth spiritual qi had already passed. Looking at the unimaginable mess on the ground, Zhang Xian was dumbfounded. The stubbornness in his heart was instantly destroyed. There was nothing to say. Even if Yang Fangsheng was alive, he wouldn't have been able to escape from the array, not to mention his corpse. Senior Zhang, look, there's a magic treasure over there. A Foundation Establishment stage disciple didn't think as much as Zhang Xian. He used his spiritual will to scan the area and found a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy. He shouted happily, "Oh, indeed." Zhang Xian used his spiritual will to scan the area and understood that the magic treasure in the array was blown here by the explosion of heaven and earth spiritual qi. Hurry, Zhang Xian said anxiously. The array is damaged. I'm afraid there won't be any cultivators or swordsmen within a few hundred miles. We're the first batch to arrive here. These magic treasures are what we want to find. It's also our great contribution. Yes, this disciple understands. The others were overjoyed. Without waiting for Zhang Xian's urging, they hurriedly used their flying techniques and released their spiritual will. They searched the ground inch by inch and began their treasure hunting journey. The magic treasures and flying swords of tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen were definitely a terrifying number. Although Xiaohua took a lot, there was still a lot left in the array. However, although there were many things, if the array exploded, the items would be like fried beans. They would scatter everywhere and scatter in the space of a few hundred miles. It really wasn't easy to find them. Zhang Xian and the others searched for more than half a day and only found a dozen magic treasures and flying swords. Of course, they couldn't be compared to Xiaohua. They were already beaming with joy when they saw so many things. As for Zhang Xian, after searching for more than half a day, he only saw magic treasures deeply embedded in the mountain walls. He didn't see any bones or the like. He already knew that it was impossible to find Yang Fanqing's corpse. His thoughts were also extinguished. Senior Yang, it's not that this little brother didn't try his best, but this is really too difficult. I'm afraid that senior brother's corpse has already turned into ashes and scattered between heaven and earth. Even if this little brother saw it, he would be powerless to do anything. Zhang Xian and the other disciples gradually pushed forward, but he still secretly muttered in his heart. Of course, if senior brother really has a spirit in the netherworld, tell this little brother where the bones are buried, and this little brother will definitely. While Zhang Xian was thinking, his eyes swept across the foothills. On the foothills, there were traces of 7 human figures. Zhang Xian couldn't help but exclaim, could it be that senior brother Yang's spirit is manifesting? Immediately, he swept the area with his spiritual will and shouted, "Disciples, quickly, there are people in the foothills." Yes, these people still have a chance to live. The disciples heard Zhang Xian's call and all gathered around. They swept the area with their spiritual will and saw the situation of Xiaohua and the others clearly. How did they get embedded in the stone walls? Xiaohua and the others' Taoist robes were all damaged and their faces were covered. Zhang Xian couldn't see clearly, but he could vaguely see that the 7 people weren't wearing the Taoist robes of the Utopia faction. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. As he spoke, he followed the traces of the 7 people in the stone walls and looked in the direction of Jingquan Mountain. Chapter 2377. These 7 people came from the direction of Mt. Chuanjin's array. Zhang Xian immediately understood and shouted, "They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiaohua and the others out from the foothills. Damn it, can't they be a little more gentle? Xiaohua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, I would have been injured by this pull. I don't even know how to save people. Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths. Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, "We have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many." That's not right, senior brother Zhang. This is Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. Another quick-witted disciple discovered, the patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley. Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiaohua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. That's right, it's Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiaohua. I recognize these 7 people. They are the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the battle of Mt. Quanjin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This This is a greater contribution than magic treasures. Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiao Hua and the others. After everyone had taken the pills, Zhang Xian's heart was slightly relieved. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiao Hua had used before and said, "These 7 people are seriously injured and can't be moved for the time being. We will first put them in the cave and leave one person to guard it. The others will follow. I to search inside." Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiao Hua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiao Hua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiao Hua and the others, Zhang Xian once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring mountain range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Quanjin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Quanjin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Xian and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring mountain range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring mountain range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Xian was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiao Hua, who was lucky enough to survive. Sigh, why is there such a big difference between people? This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Xian and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator's divine thought swept across the crater, Zhang Xian immediately left with the disciples vigilantly. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Xian and the rest returned to the cave, the 2 people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely behind were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiao Hua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Xian returned, Xiao Hua, Cui Hongxin, and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Xian and the rest, Cui Hongxin was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction? Xiao Hua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Xian, he hesitated and said, "Are you, fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction?" "Hee, junior brother Xiao, of course it's me." Zhang Xian looked at Xiao Hua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, "I am Zhang Xian, who participated in the Taiching Sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever." "Sigh, it's nothing." Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongxin, and asked again, "Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine? What happened to me and the rest?" "Hee, junior brother Xiao." Zhang Xian looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Cui Hongxin and the rest, who were confused, and said with a smile, "This must be Captain Cui Hongxin, right?" Cui Hongxin nodded and said, "That's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction. Nice to meet you." It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way, I'll explain it slowly. Zhang Xian thought for a while and said, "Okay." Xiao Hua nodded, but Cui Hongxin frowned and said, "Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? And we just recovered from our injuries?" Zhang Xian laughed softly. "The Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine no longer exists. As for how Brother Chui got injured, I don't know. However, when I saw all of you, your lives were hanging by a thread. Fortunately, although your injuries are serious, they're all on the skin and flesh. Your meridians and dantian are still intact. You'll naturally recover in these few days. Fellow Taoists, you are all lucky. Sigh, thinking about some of our friends. As he spoke, Zhang Xian's face paled. Oh, Xiao Hua understood and said softly, Senior Brother Zhang, Senior Brother Yang Fangsheng. It seems like, Junior Brother Xiao has met Senior Brother Yang before, right? Yes, and Senior Brother He Fang Yuan from Tai Ching sect, and Senior Brother Ku Xingxi from Kunlun sect. They're all old friends of mine. Sigh. Only Senior Brother He Fang Yuan was lucky enough to escape from Golden Spring Mountain and has returned to Tai Ching sect now. Zhang Xian sighed. I only heard about him 5 years ago. I haven't heard about him for the past few years. 5 years ago? Senior Brother Zhang, what do you mean? Zhen Minghui was baffled and asked unconsciously. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xian stood up and said, Let's go. Now that Golden Spring Mountain's formation has unexpectedly exploded, it attracted many cultivators and swordsmen. We should hurry back to Century City. Golden Spring Mountain's formation? What's going on? Chui Hongshin was puzzled. But immediately his face showed a trace of shock as he looked at Zhen Minghui. Senior Brother Minghui, the formation that Senior Brother Zhang mentioned, is it that layer of restriction? It should be. Zhen Minghui raised his head and looked at Xiao Hua. Junior Brother Xiao, what do you think? Sigh, it should be. Xiao Hua's face was also extremely confused. It seems that at that time, there was a sword cultivator chasing after us, and an incomparably huge force pushed us towards the restriction. Little brother's vision turned black, and I don't know anything. Jinhua, what about you? Xiao Hua turned around and asked Jinhua. Jinhua was stunned and nodded hurriedly like a chick pecking at rice. Yes, yes. I also remember this. My vision turned black. When I opened my eyes, I was in the cave and saw my fellow cultivators from the Utopia faction. I guess this is the reason why Senior Brother Zhang said we were unconscious for 5 years. Xiao Hua's face was full of realization. What? We were unconscious for 5 years. At this time, Chui Hongshan, Zhen Minghui, and the rest suddenly understood. Let's talk about it on the way. At this time, they had already flown out of the cave. Zhang Xian's divine thought swept over them and urged them. Golden Spring Mountain was far from Century City. In the past 5 years, the war had been in a stalemate, and the country of She had advanced a lot. Hence, there were more sword cultivators near Golden Spring Mountain. At this time, the cultivators from Century City had not arrived, but the sword cultivators had arrived first. Xiao Hua and the rest had recovered from their injuries, but the injuries on their meridians could not be healed quickly. They could not fly fast, so they could only be carried by the disciples of the Utopia faction. After flying for a day in the direction of Century City, they did not fly too far. And on this day, Chui Hongshin and the rest thoroughly understood everything that had happened at Quanjin Mountain. After hearing about the tragic battle at Golden Spring Mountain, Chui Hongshan, who was in the middle of it, could not help but change his expression. They were in the restrictive spell at that time and did not know about the killing outside. At this time, when they heard about it, they could not help but have goosebumps and feel lucky. Naturally, Zhang Xian and the rest also knew why Chui Hongshin and the rest could survive. It was because they had set up a defense in the spiritual stone mine and were responsible for attacking the swordsmen who went deep into the spiritual stone mine. When the spell was activated, they were being chased by the swordsmen and just happened to escape to the edge of the spell. That was because the spell had not been fully formed. With the help of the spiritual howl, they were embedded in the edge of the spell. It was also because of this that they escaped the attack of the spiritual howl and escaped with their lives. When the spell collapsed, they were thrown out of the spell of Golden Spring Mountain along with the spiritual howl and shot straight into the foothills of the mountain. Oh my God! The 9 people of the Utopia faction were fascinated by the story. This was simply the legendary fortune. This was something that could not be encountered even in a million years. What a coincidence! How could they have encountered it? However, they had no choice but to believe it. If they did not manage to gather all the swordsmen together, how could they, who were only in the foundation establishment stage, survive the spiritual hell? That was the fall of 30 Golden Core stage swordsmen. Seeing Cui Hongshin and the rest's solemn expressions, as well as their expressions of relief and fear, Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief. Damn it, if even these words cannot be deceived, then I have no other way. Xiao Hua thought to himself, oh yes, I have a small matter to ask. Cui Hongshin thought for a moment and asked softly, please ask my friend Cui. Zhang Xian was rather courteous. He was clear that although Cui Hongshin did not contribute in the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, these 7 people were still survivors and must be heavily rewarded. How are the other 3 people from the Imperial Thunder sect doing? Cui Hongshin looked at Zhang Xian carefully, afraid that there would be some bad news. To be continued. Chapter 2378. Oh, about that, Zhang Xian said with a smile. In the Battle of Golden Spring Mountain, there were 17 survivors from my sect. Among them were 3 female cultivators from the Imperial Thunder sect. They were also rewarded. As for what happened in these 5 years, I don't know. Thank you, fellow cultivator Zhang. Cui Hongshin was overjoyed. But then, his face showed a trace of loneliness. He looked up at the sky and said, alas, 5 years passed in a flash. My glory is like a song. Damn it, the disciples of a cultivation family are so arrogant. Xiao Hua sneered disdainfully. It's a pity that 5 years are gone for no reason. Cui Hongshan flew with the disciples of the utmost happiness faction. He didn't use his magic power. At this moment, he sighed in his heart and endured the pain. However, as soon as he started to use the heart technique, he was stunned, seeing the astonishment on Cui Hongshin's face as he stopped his cocky fart. Xiao Hua was still bewildered. Without waiting for him to carefully ponder over it, Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu, who were behind him, cried out in alarm. Martial Uncle Xiao, Jr. is about to build his foundation. Building his foundation? Building his foundation now? Xiao Hua was also taken aback. He hurriedly swept his divine sense over. Wasn't that the case? Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu's bodies were flashing with brilliance. Their divine senses were in a state of being released, and the pressure of the foundation establishment stage was gradually emerging. Wasn't this the state of foundation establishment? Why are you building your foundation here? Zhang Xian was shocked. Building one's foundation must attract the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If it was a normal day, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, they were in the vicinity of Golden Spring Mountain, which was very sensitive. It would definitely attract the attention of cultivators and swordsmen. If it was cultivators, they would leave. But how could swordsmen let you build your foundation safely? Do you want to use the soul accumulation talisman? Xiao Hua knew it was inappropriate and hurriedly asked. Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu looked at each other. Their eyes were full of bitterness. They had cultivated bitterly for more than 10 years and finally built their foundation. If they used the soul accumulation talisman, who knew if they couldn't build their foundation? They couldn't be compared with those disciples with heavenly aptitudes. However, if they didn't use the soul accumulation talisman, they understood the danger of this place from Zhang Xian's tone. Forget it. Zhen Hua smiled bitterly. I am willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Disciple 2. Bai Sugu also cupped his fists and said, is that so? Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out 2 accumulating spirit talismans. Are you willing to do this? We, Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu gritted their teeth and said, we are willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Ha ha ha. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. He clapped his hands and put the accumulating spirit talisman into his bag. He laughed and said, since you don't want to use it, then don't use it. You don't have to force it. With your martial Uncle Xiao overseeing this place, who can stop the 2 of you from reaching foundation establishment? Go. As Xiao Hua spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the 2 by their necks. His figure flew up and flew toward 2 mountain peaks not too far away. Xiao Hua, Zhang Xian called out from behind. Let them use the accumulating spirit talisman. If they attract sword cultivators, we won't be able to keep our lives. Senior Marshal Brother Zhang, if you're scared, feel free to leave. Xiao Hua joked as he flew. I have a junior who wants to build his foundation. How can I not look after him? Whoever dares to disturb the foundation establishment of my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, I'll kill whoever comes. Kill whoever comes. Ha ha. Alas, let's go. How could Zhang Xian leave? With a wave of his hand, the disciples of the Utopia faction led Cui Hongshun and the others to chase after Xiao Hua. The disciples of the Utopia faction were a little embarrassed. They felt that Xiao Hua was too accommodating to Jinhua and Bai Sigu. After all, they still had 2 accumulating spirit talismans. It wouldn't be too late for them to build their foundation after flying for a few days and greeting the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City. Now that they were building their foundation here, it was definitely a big bait. If they didn't attract sword cultivators, it would be absolutely impossible. At the thought of these 2 absolutes, the disciples of the Utopia faction gritted their teeth in hatred. Instead of accompanying 2 Qi refining disciples to build their foundation here and meeting sword cultivators, it would be better go to Mount Quanjin to pick up more magic weapons and snatch more magic weapons from sword cultivators. Although Xiao Hua suppressed his flying speed, he was still faster than the others. By the time Zhang Xian and the others arrived at the mountain peak, Xiao Hua had already made arrangements for Jinhua. He then brought Baisu Valley to another mountain peak. Junior brother Xiao, I'll accompany you to look after this disciple. How about letting the other disciples and junior brother Cui go over there to look after the other disciples? Zhang Xian saw that Xiao Hua could fly so fast after being injured, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He only knew that Xiao Hua had infinite strength. That's good. Xiao Hua looked at Jinhua, who was only 200 feet away from him, and nodded. You and the others take. Zhang Xian was just about to instruct when Xiao Hua smiled and said, How about this? Fellow cultivator Cui and the others stay here and ask the disciples of the Utopia faction to look after them. Thank you. Okay. Zhang Xian nodded and turned to instruct. You and the others go over. Although the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect are only in the foundation establishment stage, they're also the heroes of Jinshan Quan. You and the others have to protect them, even if you have to give up your lives. Otherwise, we'll be ashamed of them who escape from death. Senior brother, a disciple of the foundation establishment stage, said unhappily, We're here to patrol Jinshan Quan. If we were to escort the fellow cultivator of the Imperial Thunder Sect back to the Sky Patrol City, then it's our duty. We wouldn't dare to decline. But he wants to build his foundation. There's an 80 to 90% chance that he'll attract sword cultivators. I can't guarantee. Zhang Xian's face turned cold and was about to scold. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Junior brothers, just go over. Let the juniors of my family have peace of mind. You don't have to care about other things. Oh. Zhang Xian was stunned. He glanced at Xiao Hua and thought that Xiao Hua was giving him a way out. He turned to scold. Why aren't you going? Don't worry. If there are sword cultivators attacking us, how can the other cultivators not care? It's not like there's no one here. The number of cultivators is not less than the number of swordsmen. Yes, the disciples of the Utopia faction answered and turned to fly to the mountain where Jinhua was. However, from their feeble answers, it was obvious that they were not happy. Junior brother Xiao, please excuse us. Zhang Xian smiled apologetically. When we return to the Sky Patrol City, I'll teach them a lesson. Don't mention it. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and said, This is human nature. If they're excited and can't wait, I'll be worried. Ha ha ha, junior brother Xiao is still so interesting. No wonder. Hongxia Fairy favors you. Zhang Xian laughed. At this time, on the 2 mountain peaks, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth began to gather. Jinhua and Baisu Valley's divine thought gradually released. The pressure of the cultivators of the foundation establishment stage gradually grew stronger and gradually spread to the surroundings with the 2 mountain peaks as the center. Not bad. Zhang Xian saw the situation and said softly, Junior brother Xiao, the foundation of these two juniors of yours is excellent. The power of the foundation establishment stage is very strong. They're the best among the disciples of the foundation establishment stage that I have seen. They're the best among the best. Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. Compared to him, the movement of the foundation establishment stage was really not worth mentioning. However, he still smiled and nodded, with the demeanor of an elder. Yes, these two disciples' foundation is very good. It's just that they haven't had the opportunity to build their foundation establishment stage. Therefore, when they saw the condensation of true essence, they were ecstatic and wanted to build their foundation establishment stage. It's understandable. Zhang Xian nodded. Back then, we fought to the death in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Wasn't it because we wanted to build our foundation establishment stage? Junior brother Xiao didn't build his foundation establishment stage, but he also obtained a treasure and even accidentally obtained a beauty's heart. I really didn't get anything. After returning to the sect for a long time, I barely built my foundation establishment stage. To tell you the truth, I had the same thoughts as these two young friends at that time. I was ecstatic and hurriedly took the foundation establishment pill without caring about anything else. What divine accumulation pill! What great perfection of chi refinement! Let them go to hell. Ha ha ha. Xiaohua also laughed. You're lucky. I actually failed to build my foundation establishment stage for the first time, and it took me a long time to build my foundation establishment stage for the second time. Therefore, when I saw these two juniors in a hurry to build their foundation establishment stage, I empathized with them and did my best to help them build their foundation establishment stage. Yes, Zhang Xian nodded, but he still said, it's just that these two juniors' luck is a bit bad. This is not a good place, and there are many disciples who are building their foundation establishment stage who died in the hands of sword cultivators. It's better for us to be careful. Yes, I understand. Actually, we should have put the two of them together. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhanhua in the distance and the disciples of the Utopia faction sitting cross-legged next to him. If we separated them, they wouldn't affect each other, but if there were swordsmen attacking, it would be a bit difficult. Yes, I know. Xiaohua still didn't express his opinion. Seeing that Xiaohua had said so, Zhang Xian didn't say anything more. He released his divine thought and carefully took precautions. Zhenhua and Baisu Gu suddenly building their foundation establishment stage made Xiaohua very surprised. After all, they had been in a coma for the past 5 years. What made him even more puzzled was that Shui Hongshan, Zhen Minghui, Su Qing, and Qiu Su also wanted to interfere. They actually sat there and started to circulate their heart sutras slowly. Damn it, can't they circulate their heart sutras? Why do they have to do it here? Isn't this snatching the spiritual qi from the foundation establishment stage disciples? Xiaohua despised Cui Hongshan, even though there were 4 foundation establishment stage cultivators here, and the 4 of them only carefully absorbed a small amount of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Zhenhua and Baisugu's foundation establishment stage phenomenon indeed attracted the attention of the crowd. Some cultivators rushed over happily. When they scanned with their divine thought, they found out that it was 2 juniors building their foundation establishment stage. They were disappointed, but also helpless. Those with good self-restraint turned around and left. Those with bad self-restraint cursed a few words in the air and even spat. Of course, they wouldn't interfere with the 2's foundation establishment stage. After all, they were all sword cultivators of the Dao faction. They still understood this principle. If the cultivators came, would the swordsmen be far away? Immediately, several swordsmen came together. Of course, when they saw that the 2 disciples building their foundation establishment stage were guarded by several foundation establishment stage cultivators, although they had malicious intentions, they also resentfully turned around and left. Instead of wasting time here, it would be better to quickly find a flying sword. Chapter 2379. Unfortunately, after the time it took to finish a meal, Zhanhua and Baisu Valley's good luck came to an end. From the direction of Quanji Mountain, there were about 23rd grade swordsmen with their swords drawn. Their faces were filled with panic as they hurriedly flew over. While flying, they kept looking behind them. When one of them saw the phenomenon of Zhanhua and Baisu Valley's foundation building, he was overjoyed and hurriedly transmitted his voice to the other swordsmen. Those 20 swordsmen excitedly flew over. Not good. When these swordsmen flew closer, Zhang Xi noticed and hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Chui, have you all adjusted your breath? There are 20 swordsmen coming over." Xiao Hua had already seen them and didn't care at all. Seeing Zhang Xian's panic, he smiled and said, "No need to delay these people's cultivation. It's rare for them to be so hardworking. Senior brother Zhang, you go over there and stay with the fellow cultivators from the Utopia faction." Zhang Xian was somewhat hesitant. Xiao Hua was still smiling. "Senior brother Zhang, it's better to stay with your own disciples. Otherwise, if there's any mishap, you won't be able to explain it to the assembly hall." All right. Zhang Xian knew that Xiao Hua's words were reasonable and said in a low voice, "If junior brother Xiao feels that something is wrong, quickly bring the disciples over. With us together, we won't be afraid of them." "And I know." Xiao Hua nodded. After Zhang Xian flew over, Xiao Hua turned to look at the place where the swordsman flew. It was less than 3 miles away. At this time, Cui Hongshun stood up from the ground and frowned. 20 swordsmen, it's a bit tricky. "And you'd better cultivate diligently," Xiao Hua said sarcastically. "There's someone building foundation here. The spiritual energy here is very rich." Cui Hongshun didn't expect Xiao Hua to look at him like this and was slightly angry. However, he didn't bother to explain to Xiao Hua. Junior brother Xiao." Zhen Minghui also stood up and said happily, "I'm afraid you've misunderstood Captain Chui." "What did I misunderstand?" Xiao Huan naturally wouldn't admit it. "I'll let junior brother Xiao know." Zhen Minghui said in a low voice, "I just checked my meridians and heart technique. I'm not talented, although I don't have any impression of these 5 years, but these 5 years are worth 10 years of hard cultivation." "What?" Xiao Hua was extremely surprised. He knocked out the 6 of them and threw them into the space. He didn't expect that as soon as they came out, 2 of them were about to enter the foundation establishment realm, and 4 of them had made great progress in their cultivation. What had his space become? On the other side, Su Qing and Qiu Su stood up as well. Similarly, their faces lit up with joy. They smiled and said, "That's right, we've also checked. Our cultivation has indeed improved. We know that if we cultivate diligently for a few years, or even less than a year, we will be able to step into the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage." "You too?" Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and looked at Cui Hongshun. "I don't know," Cui Hongshun replied indifferently. Whether or not it is love. Xiao Hua curled his lips. This Xiao is too lazy to care. "What about you, junior brother Xiao?" Su Qing blinked and asked, "Don't tell me you didn't make any progress." "Me? Of course I do." Xiao Hua also couldn't deny it. Then he rolled his eyes and said with a profound look, "Just now this Xiao thought about it. I thought it was just this Xiao's own situation and didn't dare to ask you. I reckon it might be because we were inside the restriction, although that spiritual howl couldn't attack us, but the spiritual chi of heaven and earth could also seep into the restriction of the Great Formation. Although we were unconscious, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth still entered our meridians and pushed our cultivation." That's right. Fear appeared on Zhen Minghui's face. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth could actually rush into a person's meridians and cause a swordsman's body to explode. It could definitely pass through the restriction of the formation and enter our meridians. Fortunately, there was a great formation that blocked the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Otherwise, we would have already turned into ashes. Seeing that Zhen Minghui was able to lie so perfectly, Xiao Hua felt proud in his heart. While everyone was talking, The 20-sword cultivators had already flown to the center of the mountain with bared fangs and brandished claws. They scanned with their divine senses and stopped again. Their faces were filled with shame and anger, knowing that they had pounced on empty air. But immediately, these sword cultivators discussed a little, and with a sinister smile on their faces, they all pounced toward Xiao Hua's side. After all, the number of people on Xiao Hua's side was small. "Can you still face the enemy?" Xiao Hua turned his head and asked. "If you can't, then just stay here. Our meridians are only slightly torn. It's nothing. Why can't we face the enemy?" Cui Hongshan knew Xiao Hua's ability, but now that his cultivation had improved greatly, his heart was jumping with joy. He didn't want Xiao Hua to monopolize the limelight. "All right, then this Xiao won't stop you." Xiao Hua stretched and said, "However, this Xiao will need the time to drink a cup of tea to kill these sword cultivators. During this time, I won't have time to take care of you." "Good boy, only the time to drink a cup of tea." Su Qing secretly stuck out her tongue. "I know. We are not 3-year-old children." Cui Hongshan secretly laughed at Xiao Hua's showing off. All right. At this time, those sword cultivators were less than 100 feet away from Xiao Hua and the others. 20 flying swords had already flown over. Xiao Hua and the others each had a flying sword aimed at them, and the remaining 10 or so flying swords were actually aimed at Baisu Valley. Baisu Valley's divine sense was released and had long seen it clearly. He couldn't help but feel a little unstable. "I'm here, what are you afraid of?" Xiao Hua had been keeping his Buddhist consciousness near Baisu Valley. Seeing the speed of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowing into his body slow down, he knew something was wrong. With a loud shout, his figure suddenly rushed towards the sword cultivators. And as Xiao Hua flew out of the mountain peak, the cloud-suppressing seal was summoned by Xiao Hua. Once the cloud-suppressing seal came out of the space, it immediately became 10 feet in size. However, Xiao Hua controlled the cloud-suppressing seal and didn't absorb too much spiritual energy of heaven and earth. "Attack!" Xiao Hua roared and pointed his finger. The cloud-suppressing seal whistled and flew towards the 20 or so flying swords attacking. A powerful, confining force gushed out from the cloud-suppressing seal. Many sword cultivators felt as if their flying swords were being grasped by a pair of big hands, forcibly trying to break free from their control. The sword cultivators were greatly alarmed. They hurriedly formed a sword art and urged their sword origin, wanting to snatch their flying swords out of this unremarkable magic weapon. But at this moment, the sword cultivators only saw a golden light flash before their eyes. Immediately after, a series of blood-curdling screams rang out. Far away on another mountain peak, Zhang Xian was abnormally anxious. When he saw that there were 20 li of sword cultivators, he already wanted to combine the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction and the Imperial Thunder faction to fight the enemy together. Therefore, when he flew away, he specially warned Xiao Hua. When he saw the 20 or so swordsmen rushing toward Xiao Hua, he felt lucky in his heart, but didn't dare to move. He was afraid that he would fall for the sword cultivator's trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Instead, he hoped that Xiao Hua would quickly bring Baisu Valley and the others over. But who knew that Xiao Hua actually had the leisure to chat with Cui Hongshan and the others over there? Chapter 2380. Just as Zhang Xian was pondering whether he should bring the disciples over to rescue them, Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal appeared. Zhang Xian had heard of this cloud-suppressing seal before, and knew that it was a powerful magic treasure that Xiao Hua had obtained by chance during the Feather Immortal Assembly. However, seeing that the cloud-suppressing seal did not have much of a magic treasure's power, he thought that Xiao Hua was barely able to activate it. He was extremely anxious in his heart. Before he could call out to the other disciples, his figure flew up, wanting to rush to the rescue. But at this moment, he discovered something strange, because the dozen flying swords that were flying towards Baisu Valley had actually changed their trajectory, and were rushing towards the cloud-suppressing seal. Just as he was pondering whether the flying swords were purposely blocked by the cloud-suppressing seal, an unforgettable scene appeared. Xiaohua slapped his hand, and a half-scissor-like magic treasure fragment suddenly appeared in his hand. Under the urging of his magic power, it emitted a faint golden light. Then, the magic treasure transformed into a flood dragon and rushed towards the sword cultivators. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the front of a fourth-grade sword cultivator. The flood dragon slightly swung its tail and swept towards the sword cultivator's neck. The sword cultivator's neck was immediately covered by a sword radiance, as if to block it. However, in just an instant, the sword radiance was annihilated. The flood dragon's tail swept past the sword cultivator and rushed towards another third-grade sword cultivator behind the sword cultivator. Zhang Xian was stunned. He actually did not see clearly whether the flood dragon killed the sword cultivator or not. The fourth-grade sword cultivator, the one whose attack was said to be comparable to the late stage of Foundation establishment, screamed miserably as he fell from the sky. Even the sword cultivator's neck did not have scar. Only when he fell a few feet did a red line appear. Zhang Xian only had time to cry out in shock. The soaring dragon scissors flashed through the sword cultivators at an incomparably fast speed, and 4 swordsmen fell from the sky. This! Zhang Xian's figure stopped in the air, and his face showed bitterness. I knew it. This Xiao Hua is definitely not an ordinary person. Zhang Xian thought to himself. Back then, why is there such a big difference between people? However, just this difference was not enough to make him unable to forget it for the rest of his life. Just as Zhang Xian saw the 4 swordsmen being killed by Xiao Hua, the other swordsmen had already sensed the power of Xiao Hua's soaring dragon scissors. Many swordsmen immediately gave up on attacking Baisu Gu and formed sword seals in their hands. The dozens of flying swords transformed into all kinds of rainbow lights that broke through the confinement of the suppressing cloud seal. They surrounded Xiao Hua from all directions and stabbed toward Xiao Hua. Hiss! Zhang Xian's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the same as before. This was the combined attack of more than 10 Foundation establishment swordsmen. Who would have thought that Xiao Hua didn't care at all? He urged the transcendence energy in his hand, and the soaring dragon shears once again reaped the life of another swordsman. At the same time, the flying sword had already pierced about 3 meters into Xiao Hua's body. It seemed that the flying sword was about to pierce through his heart. Wong, with a buzzing sound that sounded like thousands of mosquitoes, the previously inconspicuous cloud-suppressing seal suddenly displayed its might. In an instant, it expanded to over 30 meters in size and smashed towards the dozen or so sword cultivators at a speed that was several times faster than before. Another incomparably valiant confinement force enveloped these sword cultivators. Fall, 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 Xiao Hua softly rebuked 3 times in a row. 3 streaks of bronze clouds fell from the cloud-suppressing seal, rapidly enveloping the dozen or so sword cultivators. And just as Xiao Hua was chanting an incantation, his figure suddenly swayed. With lightning speed, he broke away from the attack range of the dozen or so flying swords. The flying sword closest to him practically brushed past his ear as it flew away. Fall! Xiao Hua's expression didn't change in the slightest. He pointed his hand towards the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal that was always half a beat slower now smashed down like a boulder. With a boom, it simultaneously smashed into the bodies of the dozen or so sword cultivators that were already confined by the cloud-suppressing seal in midair. The sword cultivators' protective sword auras flickered extremely brightly, but they still couldn't compare to the brilliance of the cloud-suppressing seal. With just one touch, the dozen or so sword cultivators around the 4th grade were all smashed into meat paste, falling from midair. At this moment, Xiao Hua seemed to be even busier than before. With a wave of his hand, the dozen or so flying swords that had just flown past him fell into his hand. With a wave of his hand, he stored them into his space. Immediately after, he didn't stop to rest. Like a dragonfly, skimming the surface of the water. He flew into midair and also collected the storage pouches of a dozen or so sword cultivators. Only then did he clap his hands and return once again. And at this time, the sword cultivators that were preparing to kill Cui Hongshin and the other three had just begun to exchange blows with Cui Hongshin and the others. Zhang Xian was really dumbstruck. His body swayed, and he nearly fell from midair. This is a sword cultivator whose strength is comparable to that of the Foundation establishment stage. This is at least 20 cultivators in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage. How could he kill them so easily? Zhang Xian was somewhat confused. He very naturally turned his head to look at the other disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction. Obviously, those disciples were also standing on the foot of the mountain, allowing the mountain wind to blow their lapels up. It was as if Xiao Hua had set off a huge wave in their hearts. I remember that year. Xiao had entered the top 32, right? It seems that year, when he entered the arena, he lost to his senior sister from the same sect. It seems that his cultivation at that time wasn't as strong as all kinds of thoughts came one after another, like a wild horse raising its wild hooves, trampling on Zhang Xian's head until it was muddled. 2 magic treasures. Suddenly, Zhang Xian seemed to understand something. Xiao Hua actually controlled 2 magic treasures, and these 2 magic treasures were both powerful. One attracted the sword cultivator's attention. The other killed the sword cultivator. Alas, even if I have 2 magic treasures, how can I use them? Definitely. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up again. Of these 2 magic treasures, there must be something strange about one of them. Letting Zhang Xian make wild guesses, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the soaring dragon scissors disappeared into his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal made a slight rumbling sound and flew to Cui Hongshin and the other's side. Cui Hongshin and Zhen Minghui's magic power had indeed improved greatly. The thunder beads and other magic treasures in their hands were even more powerful than before. On the other hand, the 4 swordsmen, although they were also about the 3rd grade of the drawing sword stage, and their strength was comparable to the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage, seeing nearly 20 swordsmen killed by Xiao Hua in one move, their hearts had long been trembling. While fighting Cui Hongshin and the others, they still stole glances at Xiao Hua, fearing that this killing god would be unhappy and take out his magic treasures to take their lives. After fighting for half a cup of tea's time, seeing that he could neither win nor lose, a swordsman simply steeled his heart, merged his body with his sword, and urged his sword origin to fly in the opposite direction of Xiao Hua. Cui Hongshin was precisely this cultivator's opponent. He also chased after him with all his might for more than 10 zhang, but the swordsman was so fast that he had already escaped far away. This is really a blessing from heaven. Seeing this, the other 3 swordsmen were wild with joy. They were even happier than when they picked up the flying swords of the illusory swordsmen at Mount Quanjin. And of course, they also had to let those flying swords slip through Xiao Hua's fingers. The 3 swordsmen turned around, each looking for a direction to escape with extreme speed. Zhen Minghui and the others also chased for a few zhang before stopping. After all, there was still a gap, and it was impossible for them to catch up with those swordsmen. Junior brother Xiao, your cultivation is really beyond my expectations. Zhang Xian flew over with a smile on his face and cupped his hands. With Xiao Hua's cultivation, he should be at least in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage, so he could not be respectful. Where? Xiao Hua pointed at the cloud-suppressing seal and said, "This little one's magic treasure is very powerful. If senior brother Zhang had this magic treasure, it would also be possible." Immediately after, he added, "Moreover, it seems that after escaping from the great array of Mount Quanjin, this little one's cultivation has made great progress." Just now, this little one was also a little surprised. Is that so? There's such a thing? Zhang Xian was slightly stunned. This was simply dog shit luck. Congratulations, junior brother Bai. Xiao Hua looked at Bai Su Gu with a smile and said, Baisugu couldn't hide the joy on his face. He bit his lips slightly and bowed. I dare not. In front of Uncle Xiao, I'll always be a junior. If Uncle Xiao didn't show off your invincible power just now, how could I build my foundation establishment stage? Junior thanks Marshal Uncle Xiao. Ha ha ha, there's no need. You still have to thank the senior brothers who built their foundation establishment stage. Since you've built your foundation establishment stage, you have to leave the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect and return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. This battle's life and death has nothing to do with you. Xiao Hua laughed. Next, I'll send you back to Sky Patrol City safely, and everything will be fine. Yes, I understand. I'll remember Uncle Zhao's great kindness in my heart. Baisugu said respectfully, then turned to thank Shui Hongshun and the others. At this moment, Zhenhua also flew over and kowtowed to thank him. The disciples of the Utopia faction stood slightly further away, their eyes filled with respect, and there was no longer the previous neglect and dissatisfaction. Chapter 2381. When Zhenhua and Baisugu finished thanking Xiao Hua took out the storage bags of more than 10 sword cultivators. He took out less than half of the items, including 10 flying swords of average quality, and handed them to Zhenming Hui and said, "These are for everyone. You can distribute them. Zhenhua and Baisugu should take a little more. After all, they won't have a chance in the future." Yes, I know. Zhenming Hui understood Xiao Hua's meaning and divided the items into more than 10 portions. Not only did the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect get one, but also the disciples of the Utopia faction. I'm sorry. Zhang Xian was obviously surprised. After all, these items were the work of Xiao Hua, who killed the sword cultivators single-handedly. It was reasonable to say that they belonged to him, so he didn't have to distribute them. Senior Brother Zhang, please take them. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "This is the rule of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. It was set before we entered the Sky Patrol City, so I can't disobey it." This guy still cares about the rules. Shui Hongxin muttered in his heart. He didn't want to take them, but after hearing Xiao Hua's words, he took out his storage bag and put the items in it. Then, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Zhang Xian looked at the several eager disciples beside him and accepted them with a smile. The disciples beside him were also delighted. They took the items and the flying swords and put them in their storage bags. Although they had a lot of magic weapons and flying swords in their storage bags, they had to be handed over. If they were discovered by the conference hall, it would be a big crime. What Xiao Hua took out was less than half of the items in the storage bags. It was a lot for each disciple. How could they not be happy? Should we go back now, or rest for the night? Zhang Xian looked at the night sky and asked Xiao Hua's opinion. Xiao Hua looked at Shui Hongshun, who was looking at the bright moonlight, and said with a smile, "Let's hurry back to the Sky Patrol City. The sooner we get back, the sooner I can rest assured." "All right, that's what I'm thinking too." Zhang Xian naturally agreed. Then, the Utopia faction and the Thunder Control faction set off for the Sky Patrol City in a group of more than 10 people. After flying for several hours, they saw the city guards of the Sky Patrol City and the Taoist sect cultivators sent by the conference hall. They were naturally extremely surprised that Xiao Hua and the others were still alive. However, their mission this time was to snatch the magic treasures and flying swords, so they only hurriedly saw them and continued on their way. Just like the few Sky Patrol city guards that Zhang Xian had found earlier, they were in a hurry. Seeing that dawn was about to break in the east, a wisp of light emerged from the horizon. Everyone flew to a dangerous place. The winds here were biting cold, and the foothills were steep. From time to time, a foul stench would drift into their noses from afar. Even though everyone was flying high up in the air, they still frowned. Suddenly, Xiao Hua, who was flying in the middle, frowned and said urgently, "Stop." "Oh, Junior Brother Xiao, did you find something wrong?" Zhang Xian, who was standing next to him, stopped the disciples of the Utopia faction, flying in front of him immediately. "Nothing. It seems like someone is here to deliver the storage bag again." Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the foothills a few miles ahead. The foothills were covered in snow and were very high, almost under everyone's feet. There are swordsmen ambushing us. Zhang Xian raised his eyebrows and suddenly realized something. He said hurriedly, "These swordsmen have learned to be cunning and often set up ambushes on the path that we cultivators must pass through. Many cultivators have fallen into their trap. These swordsmen probably know that the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City are heading to Mount Quanjin, so they set up an ambush here. Previously, there were too many cultivators, so they didn't dare to attack. If we go over, I'm afraid we'll be attacked. How many swordsmen are there? Should we take a detour?" Zhen Minghui released his divine thought and looked around. He couldn't find anything strange, so he asked in a low voice, "Haha, why should we take a detour?" Xiao Hua rubbed his hands and said, "You wait here for a while, I'll be back soon." "Junior brother Xiao," Zhang Xian said, "according to what I know, the swordsmen who set up the ambush range from dozens to hundreds. They're all used to working together, and there are even sword formations. Junior brother is brave, but there's no need to take the risk for those storage bags." "Hundreds? Haha, it's only hundreds. This guy has sent thousands of swordsmen in and out, so why would he be afraid of this?" Cui Hongshun secretly curled his lips, knowing that Xiao Hua would definitely go. Sure enough, Xiao Hua smiled and said, it's okay. I'll go take a look. If it really doesn't work, it's not too late to escape." All right. Seeing that Cui Hongshun and the rest didn't stop him, Zhang Xian felt strange and said, "We'll go too. If we're too far away, we won't be able to save each other in time if something happens." "Good." Xiao Hua thought about it and agreed. He waved his hand and said, "All of you, follow behind this, Xiao. Don't go more than 10 feet. Then, Xiao Hua took the lead and flew forward unhurriedly. He even stopped as he flew, and his divine sense swept over the foothills again and again, as if he was really scouting the way. When Xiao Hua flew to the front of a foothill, he stopped and didn't fly forward anymore. Instead, he slapped his hand and took out the cloud-suppressing seal, which buzzed and protected himself. Then, he moved forward with ease. However, Xiao Hua had only flown a few feet when the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly smashed into the foothill about 1 zhang behind him. On the foothill, a thick layer of snow covered a few pine trees. "Ha ha, you still want to play this game with me?" Xiao Hua laughed, and the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly enlarged to the size of several zhang. With a loud rumble, the cloud-suppressing seal smashed into the pine tree. Under the yellow light, all the illusions were destroyed. A pale white light flickered, revealing more than 10 flying swords in a disorderly fashion. Under the flying swords, there were dozens of 4th or 5th grade swordsmen. The pitiful dozen or so sword shio who wanted to wait for Zhang Xian, Cui Hongxin, and the others to fall into the ambush before attacking, now had a pale golden color on their faces. They were all lying crookedly on the foot of the mountain. Their gazes were fixed on Cui Hongxin and the others. They had already let go of Xiao Hua, who was carefully exploring the path. But they didn't expect that Xiao Hua would actually turn around and throw out that inconspicuous magic weapon. That inconspicuous magic weapon was just as unexpected as Xiao Hua's. It was unimaginably heavy, and that mountain-like attack instantly destroyed the formation they had covered up with great difficulty. Not only that, their flying swords suffered a heavy blow, and their primordial spirits were also shaken. Xiao Hua laughed loudly and no longer moved forward. He pointed his finger without any trace of politeness. The cloud-suppressing seal rose up slightly and then suddenly pressed down. The group of swordsmen became anxious and tried their best to circulate their sword energy. While their bodies flew in all directions, their flying swords rushed towards the cloud-suppressing seal, trying to stop it from pressing down. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had been forced to cultivate bitterly for 5 years and had already reached the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment. That kind of magical power was simply unimaginable to them. How could they block it with their flying swords? That was simply a fool's dream. Chapter 2382. Crack, crack, crack. When the two flying swords collided with the cloud-suppressing seal, the tips of the swords immediately broke. The broken swords fell to the ground, and the masters of the flying swords also spat out a mouthful of blood. Their rapidly flying figures fell, dispirited on the foothills. When the rest of the swordsmen saw this, they couldn't help but be even more shocked. They hurriedly turned their flying swords around. How could they still dare to come into contact with Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal? Still want to leave? Xiao Hua sneered. He pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal let out a buzzing sound again. A cloud fell from above, covering the dozen or so swordsmen who wanted to escape. Go! Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, looking at the foothills not far away. The cloud-suppressing seal fell again. He didn't believe that if he smashed these swordsmen to death, their fellow apprentices wouldn't come to rescue them. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal slowly smashed on top of the cloud, the mountain rocks not far away shook. Suddenly, 20 or so swordsmen appeared. Their faces were alarmed, and each of them urged their flying swords. Those flying swords formed a slightly larger sword formation and rushed towards Xiao Hua. Haha! Xiao Hua saw another 20 or so flying swords, and he beamed with joy. Just as he was about to release the soaring dragon shears, a swift and fierce sword chi suddenly rushed out from 3 feet below Xiao Hua's body, directly stabbing towards Xiao Hua's leg. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. His divine sense very naturally swept over, but the sword chi's origin was empty. There was nothing wrong with it. What's going on? Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his body, relying on his superb flying technique to dodge. Go! Xiao Hua sensed that the sword chi had disappeared. His eyes turned slightly, and he pointed with his finger. He didn't care about the sealed sword technique, and the cloud-suppressing seal swayed again, meeting the simple sword formation that was hastily formed. Rumble! There was another loud sound. The sword formation formed by 20 or so flying swords finally collided with the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal was actually somewhat crooked and was pushed to the side. Xiao Hua's body also slightly swayed. Suddenly, the swift and fierce sword chi from just now appeared again, and it was again within 2 feet. And at this time, the sword chi had already approached Xiao Hua's neck. Formless sword. At this point, seeing that there was still no change in his divine sense, Xiao Hua came to a realization no matter how stupid he was. However, Xiao Hua wasn't shocked but delighted instead. He waved his hand and was about to execute the heaven and earth sleeve technique to envelop the sword chi. However, just as he turned around, his eyes turned again. His body moved swiftly and flew up slightly, approaching the cloud-suppressing seal. At this time, more than a dozen swordsmen appeared from other places and flew towards Cui Hongshen and the others. The 20 or so swordsmen who were blocking Xiao Hua once again urged their sword energy to organize the chaotic flying swords and attack Xiao Hua. That invisible sword once again disappeared from the sky. Xiao Hua swept out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he still couldn't find any clues. Very good. Xiao Hua secretly rejoiced in his heart. Then he stealthily opened his left hand. Within his Dharma eye, a faint blue brilliance appeared so unique among the numerous dim sword lights. At this moment, the light blue brilliance once again landed below Xiao Hua. Ayaya! Xiao Hua's face revealed panic. While urging the cloud-suppressing seal to block the attacks of the 20 swordsmen, he dodged the invisible sword below him. The invisible sword was indeed strange. Seeing that Xiao Hua was in a very difficult situation, it immediately gave up its previous sneak attack and actually began to aimlessly attack Xiao Hua's surroundings. If Xiao Hua wasn't able to see it with his Dharma eye, he would really be somewhat exhausted to deal with it. Good, now is the time. Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal was once again hit by the flying swords of a group of sword cultivators. His figure was forced to fall. The invisible sword once again stabbed towards him, but the sword chi still hadn't appeared and was still 4 feet away. "Don't hurt my Taoist disciple. I'm coming." Right at this moment, a voice that Xiaohua was very familiar with resounded, and then a golden light that shot into the sky flew over from afar like a golden dragon. Although that golden light hadn't yet come close, that fierce, baleful aura and the sound of wind tearing through the void could be heard. Li Zongbao." Xiaohua's divine sense swept and was immediately overjoyed. After the golden light, wasn't it precisely the snow-haired Li Zongbao? "Oh, Xiaohua." Li Zongbao released the immortal piercing whip and naturally also swept out with his divine sense. Seeing that Xiaohua's face hadn't changed in the slightest, he was also slightly stunned. He didn't expect that a Foundation establishment cultivator who relied on a magic treasure to resist 20 drawing swordsmen would actually be the first level chi refining cultivator he saw before. Xiaohua's slight distraction allowed the invisible sword to come within a foot of him. The sword chi flashed and was about to pierce Xiaohua's heart. Li Zongbao also turned pale with fright. He also didn't discover the invisible sword. However, he was really far away. Even if he reminded or used the immortal piercing whip to save him, he couldn't do it. Just as Li Zongbao was regretting in his heart, he saw Xiaohua calmly raise his left hand slightly. At the same time, a golden light not inferior to the immortal piercing whip flashed out from Xiaohua's right hand. That golden light flashed away, and a bamboo leaf-like jade sword appeared. It fell between Xiaohua's left thumb and index finger. Immediately after, a sound of astonishment rang out. Not even 2 feet in front of Xiaohua, a petite swordswoman with a drawn sword appeared. Her dainty face was filled with absolute disbelief as she looked at Xiaohua, and her eyes were filled with pain. Because a jade-like soft hand and a lotus root-like arm were currently holding the bamboo leaf-like jade sword, and blood had just seeped out of her arm. Ouch! Seeing the female cultivator appear, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. He brushed his hand, and a Wutsong pill appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, the Wutsong pill was easily sent into the swordsman's mouth. Wei did this as smoothly as moving clouds and flowing water. He himself was a bit astonished. "Granny, when did this young master have such tender feelings for the fairer sex?" "I forget it. Who told this young master to be a man?" Xiaohua couldn't help but secretly find an excuse for his actions. Once the Wutsong pill entered the female swordsman's mouth, it immediately turned into a liquid that flowed down the woman's throat. The woman's almond eyes turned vertical, shocked and angry. She clearly resented Xiaohua for using poison again. Just as she was about to circulate her energy to force the medicinal liquid out, she saw Xiaohua send the invisible sword in front of her eyes again. He said indifferently, "Still not taking it?" "This." The woman was slightly stunned. The medicinal liquid of the Wutsong pill had already entered her stomach. Although the woman didn't know what kind of pill Xiaohua gave her, she could still distinguish the medicinal fragrance of the Wutsong pill. It was clearly a kind of healing pill. Seeing the invisible sword being sent back, the woman naturally raised her hand and used her uninjured left hand to receive it. Her mind didn't have any thoughts at all. Just as Xiaohua was showing tender feelings for the fairer sex, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip had already landed near the 20-sword swordsman. The whip's shadow flickered and turned into 20 rays of light that hit the swordsman's body. Puff, puff! A series of light sounds could be heard. Many swordsmen's body flashed with sword rays, and their figures were all crooked and couldn't stand steadily in midair. After all, Li Zongbao was far from being a sword cultivator, and he had split into 20 whip shadows to attack the 20-sword swordsman at the same time. Moreover, he didn't have the piercing immortal whip in his hand, so the might of this magic weapon couldn't be fully displayed. Instead, it was blocked by the swordsman's attack. Seeing that Xiaohua alone was enough to make everyone drink a pot of water, and even the woman's own arm had been chopped off, and this was another white-haired cultivator she had heard of before, the woman shouted without hesitation. She was the first to circulate her sword origin, and her figure disappeared in midair. Want to go? Ha ha ha. Then you have to leave behind your flying swords. Xiao Hua very naturally returned the invisible sword to the woman and immediately regretted it. Hearing the woman shout to retreat, he immediately laughed and circulated the cloud-suppressing seal. Those 20 flying swords were firmly suppressed by him, and those swordsmen simply couldn't move. Want to go? Quickly hand over your life. At this time, Li Zongbao had already flown over. He had already seen Xiao Hua's action of returning the swords, but his face was cold, without any expression. At the same time, the piercing immortal whip flew back to his hand, and he was about to attack with magic power. Li Zongbao's reputation among sword cultivators was even greater than Xiao Hua's. Moreover, he was widely known by the swordsmen. Seeing this situation, they couldn't help but panic. How could they dare to stay any longer? They anxiously fled into the distance like stray dogs. So much so that, in the foothills 100 zhang away, several groups of swordsmen appeared and fled without fighting. Seeing the swordsmen fleeing, Li Zongbao's gaze swept over and precisely saw the 10 people imprisoned by Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal. With a cold snort, he swung the piercing immortal whip. With a rumbling sound of wind and thunder, that wave-like whip shadow rolled over and mercilessly smashed down. Even Xiao Hua somewhat couldn't bear to see the 10 swordsmen being smashed into meat paste. Soft-hearted, Li Zongbao put away the piercing immortal whip and coldly said, "That woman used the famous invisible sword, named Guyu. Who knows how many Dao sect disciples have died in her hands? You, on the other hand, not only did you not take her life, you actually returned the invisible sword to her. This seems to be different from your hobby." As he spoke, Li Zongbao glanced at the 20 flying swords under the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua's face slightly reddened. Just now, it was purely a natural reaction, without any thought. However, since he had already returned it, how could he have a nerve to take it back? He could only vent his anger on the 20-sword cultivator's flying swords. Junior, is somewhat soft-hearted. Xiao Hua didn't hide it and said in a low voice. In his eyes, this Li Zongbao was a senior, and he didn't care how Li Zongbao looked at him. Junior, your cultivation is almost at the middle stage of foundation establishment. You can just call me senior brother. Li Zongbao coldly said, "Moreover, this magic treasure of yours is also not bad. Just now, I thought I had encountered some outstanding talent." Xiao Hua embarrassedly laughed again and put away the cloud-suppressing seal. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior brother Li, you should take a look. Isn't this the junk I obtained at the Taiching Sect's Feather Immortal Assembly? How can it compare to senior brother's magic treasure?" TSK, Li Zongbao curled his lips. If it was someone else, he definitely wouldn't say anything, but Xiao Hua was different from others. This magic treasure has been repaired quite a bit, and its power is close to that of my immortal whip. Just now, what was the magic treasure you used to cut that woman in half? This poor Taoist actually didn't see it clearly. Chapter 2383. Alas, Xiao Hua took out the Tangjiao scissors with a bitter face and said, "I only have some junk here. How can it be compared to Brother Li's fairy piercing whip?" Seeing that there was only half a Tangjiao scissors, Li Zongbao smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if it's complete or not, as long as it can be used. You cut off the arm of Guyu, the shapeless sword. If word got out, everyone would be envious." TSK, this is nothing. Xiao Hua put away his magic weapon. At this time, Zhang Xen and the other disciples of the Utopia faction came over and bowed. "Greetings, Brother Li." Li Zongbao's face was cold and his attitude was different from Xiao Hua's. He asked, "Why are you here?" Zhang Xen was not surprised and quickly reported the cause of the matter. "Oh, you actually escaped from the battle of Jingquan Mountain?" Li Zongbao glanced at Xiao Hua. "And It seems like that's the case. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose, looking somewhat baffled. Seeing Li Zhongbao's surprise, Zhang Xian smiled bitterly. Almost all the cultivators in the Sky Patrol City knew that the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect had fallen because only 7 people from the Imperial Thunder Sect died. And Li Zhongbao did not know about this. It seemed that Li Zhongbao did not care about the situation of the battle. After Zhang Xian finished his report, Cui Hongxin and the others also came over. Zhen Minghui collected the storage pouches of the 20 or so swordsmen, as well as the 10 or so flying swords that Xiao Hua had knocked down, and handed them over to Xiao Hua. No, this is Brother Li's. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and asked Zhen Minghui to give the storage bag to Li Zhongbao. I don't want it. Li Zhongbao waved his hand and said, These things are useless to me. Then he looked at Xiao Hua and said, If you like it, take it yourself. Great. Xiao Hua took the storage bag and said happily, Thank you, Brother Li. Don't mention it. It was originally yours. Li Zhongbao said lightly. Immediately, Cui Hongxun and the others came to meet him. They saw that Li Zhongbao was powerful and knew that he was a famous disciple of the Utopia faction. After listening to Zhang Xian's introduction, they admired him even more. Li Zhongbao's reputation was extremely famous in the 3 kingdoms. Even Cui Hongxin had regarded Li Zhongbao as his goal. Or rather, he was Tu Hong's idol before he met him. At the side, Zhang Xian also introduced proudly, My senior brother Li's magic power is now boundless. People call him the number 1 person below the Aura's core stage. However, these were words that he was used to saying. At this moment, he stopped halfway and naturally looked at Xiao Hua. Even Cui Hongxun, Zhen Minghui, and the others had some thoughts. Li Zhongbao was keenly aware of this. He glanced at Xiao Hua and said faintly, Zhang Xian, that's other people's false praise. How can you take it seriously? Didn't you see junior brother Xiao? You can deal with 20 bright swordsmen with ease. You're much more powerful than me. Tisk, senior brother Li, don't flatter me. Xiao Hua retorted bluntly. That's because little brother's Dharma treasure is powerful. Little brother, I don't believe that if you wave your immortal piercing whip, they will still have a physiological reaction. Li Zhongbao did not refute. He knew that if he was any closer, the lives of those bright swordsmen might not have been saved. In the 5 or 6 years since the beginning of the war, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had already reached the late stage of foundation establishment. Although he had not reached the peak, he was worthy of being called the number 1 person below the Aura's core stage. Just like before, Xiao Hua kept most of the things for himself and distributed a small portion to everyone. Li Zhongbao looked at Xiao Hua with interest and asked faintly, Xiao Hua, are you going back to Sky Patrol City now? Yes. Where else can we go if not back to Sky Patrol City? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned and kept the storage bag and other things. Once we return to Sky Patrol City, the flying sword storage bag will not come back. Li Zhongbao narrowed his eyes and said, Are you interested in going with me? Oh, where to? Xiao Hua blinked and asked. I don't know where to go. Li Zhongbao said, However, I'm going to kill Qin Jian. Are you interested? Who is Qin Jian? Xiao Hua was puzzled, but then he suddenly realized that he should have heard of him in the tea house in Sky Patrol City. He smiled and said, Is he the illusory swordsman? Yes, you must have heard of him. Li Zhongbao nodded and pointed at Xiao Hua. I'm not his opponent. If I can get junior brother Zhao's help, I'll be able to make a contribution. Good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, I'm willing to follow you. But then Xiao Hua scratched his head and said, Senior brother Li, I'm a disciple of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to follow you. Is it? As long as you're willing, you can follow me now. Li Zhongbao clapped his hands and took out a token with the appearance of a mountain peak. What's this? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Li Zhongbao said proudly, This is the special token of the meeting hall of the True Path Sect's Yinshi Mansion. I have the right to order all True Path Sect disciples below the Aura's core stage to obey my orders. Wow, so powerful. Xiao Hua could not help but be envious. Imperial Thunder Sects, Xiao Hua. Li Zongbao's face tightened, and he raised the token. I want you to follow me now. Do you understand? Disciple, Xiao Hua understands. Xiao Hua did not dare to neglect and bowed. Then Li Zongbao looked at Cui Hongshan and said, Fellow Taoist Cui, please take out the token of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Yes. Cui Hongshan's heart was bitter, and he obediently took out the token. And yours? Li Zongbao turned to look at Xiao Hua. Oh no, Xiao Hua also woke up at this time. If he followed Li Zongbao, what would Cui Hongshan and the others do? Although they were about to reach the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, they were still ants in a war. Senior Brotherly, can I not go? Xiao Hua said embarrassedly. Li Zongbao coldly glared at him and said, The meeting hall's token is a command to cultivators. No one dares to disobey. If you don't go, just wait for the meeting hall to kill you. But I'm a little reluctant to part with the Imperial Thunder Sect brothers. Xiao Hua did not dare to say it out loud and explained tactfully. Li Zongbao said coldly, They are the survivors of Quanjin Mountain. They have already been rewarded. Other than me, who else doesn't know? My Dao Sect's 11 survivors of Quanjin Mountain have all returned to their respective sections. I'm afraid the 6 of them will not stay in Sky Patrol City for long. There's no need to talk about these 2 disciples who have just reached the Foundation establishment realm. Once they return to Sky Patrol City, they will be sent back to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Oh, I see. Xiao Hua heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. All right then, I'm willing to follow Brother Li. Chapter 2384. But immediately after, Xiao Hua faintly felt that something was wrong. After Li Zongbao placed the command medallion on top of the 2 command medallions and a bright light flashed, Xiao Hua suddenly realized something and said, That's not right. Senior Brother Li, I'm the same as Senior Brother Zhan and the rest. We're both heroes. I can also return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Senior Brother Li, you can't lie to me like this, right? Hee hee. Li Zongbao smiled and returned the tokens to Cui Hongshan and Xiao Hua. It's too late now. You've been conscripted by me. Senior Brother Li, Xiao Hua frowned. He still wanted to dawdle. Fellow Cui and the rest returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Naturally, you're the only one in the first team. Your contributions belong to the first team. You don't want to win glory for the sect. Li Zongbao asked. Thinking of his prideful master, Xiao Hua hesitated. If he had outstanding contributions, he would be extremely happy. Besides, there are still many flying swords for sword cultivators. Now that there are drawing swordsmen and you and I have killed Qin Jian, won't we have illusory swordsmen's flying swords? Don't you want their storage pouches? Li Zongbao continued to ask. Thinking of the dozens of illusory swordsmen's flying swords in his space, Xiao Hua lost interest. Cough, cough, Li Zongbao continued. The Sword Dao war is intense now. Other than some disciples who haven't improved for a long time, there are many disciples with potential who are about to enter the battlefield. According to what I know, Yin Guichong and Hong Xia Fairy from the Washing Flower sect will be here soon. These words instantly lit up Xiao Hua's eyes. Xiao Hua said without any hesitation, Let's see what Senior Brother Li is talking about. It is my duty as a cultivator to contribute to my Dao sect. Even without the reasons that Senior Brother Li has mentioned, I would still follow Senior Brother Li. Isn't it Qin Jian's head? I'll chop it off and use it as a urinal for you. It's good that you know. Li Zongbao looked at the sky and said, I've received news that there will be an ambush in the Gale Snow Plains. I'm afraid it's Qin Jian's doing. Let's go now. Senior Brother Li, we still have to wait for a while. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically. I think it's better to escort them back to the Sky Patrol City. They're disciples on duty. You're still escorting them. Li Zongbao was a little bit unhappy. Hee hee. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes at Li Zongbao, but didn't explain. All right. Li Zongbao was also helpless. He knew clearly that Xiao Hua did not want the disciples of the thunder-controlling sect to be in danger. Secondly, he was impressed by the power of Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal. Together with his immortal piercing whip, he might be able to kill Qin Jian. Therefore, he had to give in. Fortunately, they were not too far away from the teleportation device in the Sky Patrol City. After a day and a night, Li Zongbao found the teleportation device that was very secretive and only used by a few people. The Golden Core cultivator in charge of the teleportation device did not expect that Shui Hongshun and Zhang Xian, who were not even at the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage, would find this place. When he saw Li Zongbao leaving, he opened the teleportation device and sent the disciples of the Thunder-controlling sect and the Utopia faction back to the Sky Patrol City in batches. Damn it, having a reputation is really useful. Xiao Hua was a little envious. Not only can we use the secretive teleportation device, but we can also recruit other disciples at will. Even Shui Hongshun has to admire us. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said, "Brother Li, isn't it a little tiring for us to fly like this? I have a flying device here. Why don't we use it?" "You have a flying device?" Li Zongbao regained his indifference. "Why didn't you take it out earlier?" Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out a small flying boat. He said with a smile, "This belongs to the Qi Qiao sect. I was afraid that they would ask for it." "Well, there's no harm in using it in the future," Li Zongbao said as he stepped on it. "Just say it's a gift from me." "Damn it, why is there such a big gap between people?" Xiao Hua and Zhang Xian were puzzled. After boarding the flying boat, Xiao Hua naturally controlled it. Li Zongbao sat cross-legged and had already entered a meditative state. Xiao Hua was originally prepared to wait for Li Zongbao to ask about his experiences these past few years and why his cultivation had already reached the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Seeing that Li Zongbao didn't ask, he felt relieved. He controlled the flying boat while checking his cultivation for the past 5 years. Xiao Hua's current constitution was of the earth attribute. The cultivation method he cultivated was also an ordinary cultivation method from the spirit husbandry sect. When he asked for the cultivation method from Zhang Qingxiao, Yellow Flower Ridge, he wanted to see if there was a chance to change his cultivation method. However, he didn't expect that in a short 10 years, he would be forced to cultivate this cultivation method to the end. Now, he was already at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. In a few years, as long as he cultivated normally, he should be able to condense his core according to the situation when he was refining his qi. However, when he thought about the strange state of his Foundation establishment realm, Xiao Hua frowned. He really didn't know what kind of test he would face when he condensed his core. If there was a lightning tribulation, Xiao Hua didn't dare to think about it anymore. His body trembled slightly. Maybe I should make some preparations for condensing my core. Xiao Hua thought to himself. However, he immediately scratched his ears and cheeks. He didn't have any reference for condensing his core. Even if he was helpless at this moment, he was probably preparing to condense his core, right? Martial Uncle Jin Qing is the best. Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the jade slip that Jin Qing gave him. Not only did he obtain some understanding of the Foundation establishment realm from the jade slip, but he also obtained a strange object in the ink black forest and refined it into the current wishful staff. Now, he had to rely on Jin Qing's jade slip to comprehend the core. Jin Qing really owed him a big favor. Alas, it's a pity that I returned to the Imperial Thunder sect in a hurry and didn't visit Martial Uncle Jin Qing. I don't know if Martial Uncle Jin Qing and Chun-Yi know each other. Xiao Hua thought of Chun-Yi and felt a little embarrassed. If Chun-Yi and Martial Uncle Jin Qing are friends, I'm afraid I can't make a move. Forget it. If that's the case, why can't I let her go? There's also Rock Border Sect's Chang Yefeng's Kunlun mirror. That thing looks a little familiar. If I have the chance, I must get it and take a look. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua separated his primordial spirit to look at the mysterious dark clouds. The strange fragrance in the sky was still there, and Xiao Hua's primordial spirit had grown a lot. It was still dancing happily with the fluctuations, as if it didn't know fatigue. However, at this time, there was a trace of mystery in the dance. When it danced, the whole primordial spirit also trembled, as if it was about to become one with the fluctuations. Of course, more than half of the black silk wood was gone, and the place where Xiao Hua's primordial spirit was located was a lot taller. It was almost 30% of the whole sky. If I look at this progress, a piece of black silk can actually cultivate 60% of the soul cultivation method in the sky. This thing is really precious. If this young master wants to master this soul cultivation method, then I'll have to make a piece of it. Xiao Hua thought to himself, and then retreated from the heaven ring of Qi. In addition to the soul cultivation method, the Phoenix Dharma body's progress was extremely fast. Since Li Zongbao was here, Xiao Hua wouldn't easily release the Dharma body. As for the dragon transformation art, it was really like an old ox pulling a broken cart. After cultivating for so long, there wasn't any special progress. However, if it wasn't for the dragon transformation art, Xiao Hua's meridians would have been broken by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth at the beginning of his cultivation and died. Therefore, Xiao Hua only casually looked and still let the primordial spirit cultivate endlessly, without slacking off. This time, Xiao Hua's cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, but it was different from last time. There wasn't too much spiritual qi of heaven and earth in his meridians that hadn't been refined. He only needed to refine it when he was cultivating, and it wouldn't cause any special impact to his cultivation. After Xiao Hua checked all of this, he closed his eyes and digested the information from the primordial spirit that comprehended the sword slip. Since the sword pouch that Ling Yunwu was looking for was together with the black silk wood, it was obviously not an ordinary item. The most basic use of the sword pouch was to store flying swords. It was precisely because of this that the sword pouch needed to be made with special techniques and materials to be able to withstand the sword hums of the flying swords without breaking. Ling Yunwu wanted to use the sword pouch to catch the spirit-swallowing bugs. However, in addition to this, the sword pouch had an even more important use, and that was to set up a sword formation. Regarding the sword formation, Xiao Hua was deeply engraved in his heart. It was because of that damn 7-star sword formation that he was left in the great formation of Golden Spring Mountain. He was forced to cultivate bitterly for 5 years, and even the Phoenix celestial body benefited from it. In Xiao Hua's understanding, the sword formation was either a cooperation between several people or set up by himself. Of course, if he set up the sword formation by himself, then the requirements of his divine sense and primordial spirit were extremely high. Even Xiao Hua himself couldn't easily use it now. However, this sword pouch made up for this shortcoming. According to what was recorded in the sword scroll and Xiao Hua's understanding, a swordsman only needed to refine the sword pouch and then put the flying swords of the same quality into the sword pouch according to the arrangement of the sword formation. When facing the enemy, he only needed to open the sword pouch, and the flying swords would be arranged according to the arrangement of the sword formation. A swordsman controlling the sword formation through the sword pouch was much easier than directly using divine sense and primordial spirit to control the sword formation. Great! Xiao Hua was overjoyed. If Li Zongbao wasn't present, he would definitely do a somersault on this flowing cloud flying ship. His sword playing the world was to use 10,000 flying swords to conquer the world. Unfortunately, he could only split out 64 flying swords, and even after using his primordial spirit to control the flying swords, he still had some reservations and wasn't used to splitting out flying swords. Therefore, there was no need to mention the sword formation. Now, with this sword pouch and the flying swords transformed by Ling Yunwu and the other illusory swordsmen, wouldn't they be able to form the sword formation? Thinking, Xiao Hua immediately took out the sword scroll and other items that he got from Golden Spring Mountain and searched one by one to see if he could find the array of the 7-star sword formation. There really is one. Not long after, Xiao Hua found a complete sword scroll. It was one of the sword scrolls that he picked up from the space of the 7 stars great array. This young master knew that among these 10 swordsmen who set up the Great Array, there must be someone holding the sword scroll of the Great Array. Chapter 2385. The wolf-headed man was furious. He threw away the leg bone in his hand and stood up. His wild gaze swept towards the source of the voice. Haha, it's actually 2 cultivators with soft skin and tender flesh. Aren't they just giving us a treat? The leopard-headed man swept with his divine sense and laughed loudly. His body didn't move at all. The wolf-headed man naturally also saw them. Seeing that there were only 2 cultivators around the middle stage of Foundation establishment, he sneered. In front of him were several cultivators who were being eaten raw. Which one of them wasn't stronger than them? Don't be careless. The pig-headed man hurriedly stood up and said, 2 Foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't have come here for no reason. Moreover, seeing us brothers here, they still dare to come here. They must have something to rely on. So what? The leopard-headed man sneered, but still stood up. Nearby, more than a dozen valiant beast cultivators covered in blood also stood up and threw away the meat in their hands. Feeling their hands, they each picked up their own weapons from the ground. Their eyes revealed a fierce expression as they looked towards the source of the voice. Xiaohua, you only need to use the cloud-suppressing seal. You can only imprison as many as you can. On the flowing cloud-flying ship, Li Zongbao's voice was still calm as he instructed, my immortal piercing whip will follow your cloud-suppressing seal. Imprison as many as you imprison. I will kill as many as you kill. Good. Xiaohua couldn't compare to Li Zongbao's ruthlessness. His divine sense swept over, and the anger in his heart had already been ignited. Naturally, there were deaths on the battlefield, and no one could blame anyone. However, the cruelty of the beast cultivators had long surpassed the scope of war. How could Xiaohua be merciful? Go. Seeing that the dozen or so beast cultivators had also flown into the air and were about to surround them, Xiaohua clapped his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal rumbled and flew into the air. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal appeared, its ancient bronze brilliance greatly flourished. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth swarmed in, and rays of white jade condensed at the edge of the cloud-suppressing seal. Oh! Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's might, Li Zongbao was also slightly shocked. Clearly, it had exceeded his expectations. Isn't it just a magic weapon? It's not like I haven't seen it before. The wolf-headed beast cultivator at the front sneered, his hoarse voice spreading far and wide. At the same time, he waved his hand, and a weapon that looked very similar to a wolf-tooth club appeared in the air. His body flew up, completely disproportionate to his enormous size. Go! The leopard-headed beast cultivator also waved its hand. 2 other ox-headed beast cultivators flew out from the encirclement and charged towards Xiaohua and Li Zongbao. It's actually a demonic weapon? Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and saw the wolf-tooth club in the wolf-headed beast cultivator's hand. He couldn't help but be slightly astonished and secretly said, this beast cultivator, when did he start using demonic tools? Soon after, Xiaohua sneered and said, brotherly, it looks like these beast cultivators aren't fools. They actually know to separate and face the enemy. This little brother's cloud-suppressing seal might not be able to wipe out his mother in one go. However, it seems that the bold one is the leader. How about we kill these for beasts first? No problem. As long as you can imprison them, I will be able to kill them. Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip was already in his hand. Fall! Xiaohua's hand formed a seal, and the cloud-suppressing seal rapidly expanded. When it was about 10 zhang tall, it slightly trembled and a cloud fell down, smashing towards the wolf-headed beast cultivators. The wolf-headed beast cultivator held the wolf-tooth club in his hand. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's terrifying power, he also started to take it seriously. However, he was also clear in his heart that such a powerful magic weapon wasn't something an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator could easily control. Therefore, he urged his magic power to quickly fly towards Xiaohua, wanting to seize the opportunity before the cloud-suppressing seal fell. Who would have thought that Xiaohua only slightly urged the cloud-suppressing seal to fly towards him? When the cloud-suppressing seal was slightly raised, a valiant, imprisoning force pressed down on the cloud-suppressing seal, directly suppressing the magic power in his body. He actually couldn't break free? Roar, the wolf-headed beast cultivator was shocked. Without thinking, it raised its head and roared. Then its body suddenly expanded. The clothes that were previously draped over its body were torn to shreds. A monster with the upper body of a huge black wolf and the lower body of a human appeared in the air. This monster was at least 20 feet tall. Then, in the abnormally thick wolf claws, the wolf-tooth club swayed like a toy, stirring up the spiritual energy with a hoo sound, and smashed towards a cloud. Buzz, just like Xiao Hua's previous waving of the wishful steel staff, smashed the imprisoning force of the Seven Stars' Great Array. This wolf-headed beast cultivator's demonic weapon also shook the imprisoning force above the cloud. The cloud, condensed by magic power, was also somewhat collapsing along with the demonic weapon's agitation. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. This was a technique that used force to break restrictions. Of course, he had long known about it, but he didn't use it too much. He was often using it for sneak attacks. It was only recently that he obtained the wishful steel staff that this technique had a chance to be used openly. He didn't expect that this extremely ugly beast cultivator had actually used it to such a degree of perfection. At this moment, Xiao Hua came to a sudden understanding. It was probably precisely because of this that these Dao sect cultivators on the ground were so easily annihilated. If there was no Li Zongbao on the side, Xiao Hua would have already taken out the wishful steel staff and fought with these damn things. However, since he wanted to cooperate with Li Zongbao now, it was better to use the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua didn't dare to neglect. He once again formed a seal, and another imprisoning cloud fell. The several beast cultivators next to the wolf-headed beast cultivator obviously also noticed the abnormality. They also urged their secret method, and each beast cultivator's beast form appeared. The demonic weapon in their hands danced very tacitly and smashed towards the cloud. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Under the attack of these four powerful beast cultivators' demonic artifacts, the imprisoning cloud, which had always been invincible, only lasted for a few breaths. Then, it let out a roar similar to the cloud-suppressing seal and disappeared into the air. Ha ha ha! The wolf-headed beast cultivator laughed. Dao's sex child. This is the toy you rely on. In front of this grandpa. It's just a piece of junk. Why don't you obediently give me your life? After saying that, he actually gave up the cloud-suppressing seal and wanted to rush towards Xiao Hua. Wanted to smash Xiao Hua's abnormally young head into pieces. However, Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to them. He pointed a finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly trembled. Its ancient bronze brilliance flourished greatly, and several patches of clouds once again floated down. Streaks of light once again enveloped the four beast cultivators from above. Roar, the wolf-headed beast cultivator roared towards the sky. Grandpa will tear your magic weapon to pieces. Let you completely give up. Immediately, his figure was like a gust of wind, crossing the air, and a dark figure rushed towards the falling clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal. At the same time, the leopard head and other beast cultivators emitted a black brilliance, and even some black gas came out. They waved their demonic weapons, trying to break free from the imprisonment above the clouds, and wanted to rush to Xiao Hua, who was several feet away. Xiao Hua coldly snorted, and his hand shook again. The cloud-suppressing seal rumbled again, and several pieces of clouds fell again to attack the wolf-headed beast cultivator. Seeing Xiao Hua unexpectedly drop clouds one after another, and his magic power not showing the slightest sign of exhaustion, the wolf-headed beast cultivator had a somewhat bad feeling in his heart. He saw that the wolf-headed beast cultivator's figure had yet to touch the clouds, but the several clouds piled up together with a suffocating force prevented him from flying a step higher. The bronze brilliance above the clouds reflected the bloodthirsty eyes of the beast cultivator, and once again aroused the beast cultivator's wild nature. Bang, bang, bang. With the sound of hammering in succession, the pitch-black fists of several beast cultivators hit his body. That black brilliance flashed with a scarlet brilliance, and the beast cultivator's head swelled up again. Swish! In midair, the abnormally thick forearms of several beast cultivators madly streaked across, giving birth to rows of phantoms, and together with the demonic tool, they simultaneously slapped the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal. Rumble, rumble. Like a hammer hitting the surface of a drum, the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal were actually torn apart by them again, and that valiant force also disappeared. Several pieces of clouds were destroyed by the beast cultivators, and the brilliance of Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal was also somewhat dim, as if his magic power was running out. Oh! Xiao Hua felt somewhat surprised, but Xiao Hua also didn't seem to be surprised. The magic power in his body surged, and his hands formed seals again. The cloud-suppressing seal shook again, and 3 more pieces of clouds fell down one after another. Watch this! Seeing Xiao Hua skillfully controlling the cloud-suppressing seal, and in the blink of an eye, he exchanged several blows with the 4 beast cultivators. Li Zongbao also didn't dare to be negligent. With a loud shout, he took out the immortal piercing whip. Li Zongbao dragged the magic treasure upside down, and the magic power in his body surged. His right hand suddenly swung, and the immortal piercing whip swung out a row of light golden whip shadows, and with the sound of wind and thunder, it struck towards the wolf-headed beast cultivator and the others. That immortal piercing whip was indeed powerful. Not only did it absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within several tens of feet, but when the whip shadows stirred, small hurricanes already appeared. Pa 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 pa, seeing the might of the immortal piercing whip, several beast cultivators knew that the situation wasn't good, and each of them brandished their demonic tools, wanting to smash the whip shadows together. Unfortunately, before their magic power surged, the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal fell down again, and they were confined, unable to mobilize their magic power. The immortal piercing whips might smashed onto the bodies of several beast cultivators. With a loud bang, the wolf-headed beast cultivator hit the main body of the immortal piercing whip. Originally, his body was incomparably hard, almost comparable to magic tools and magic treasures. But in an instant, his flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Even when the magic power of the immortal piercing whip reached, the beast cultivator's body exploded. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Bang, bang, bang. The other whip shadows also fell down in succession, and the bodies of the other 3 beast cultivators also collapsed. They were all badly mutilated, and they screamed miserably as they fell from the sky. Just when Li Zongbao killed the wolf-headed beast cultivator, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, and his magic power surged again. The cloud-suppressing seal flew towards the surrounding beast cultivators, who were originally eager to besiege them, but when they saw the wolf-headed beast cultivator being killed, their eyes flashed with hesitation. However, the dozen or so beast cultivators surrounded the 2 of them, so the cloud-suppressing seal couldn't cover all of them and could only smash the pig-headed beast cultivator and a few others. Those few are yours. This was the second time Xiao Hua saw the might of the immortal piercing whip, and he was also envious in his heart. He pointed his finger at the remaining beast cultivators and shouted. Chapter 2386. Okay, Li Zongbao responded indifferently and waved the immortal piercing whip again. A row of whip shadows danced again, and like a stormy sea, they smashed towards the remaining beast cultivators. However, Xiao Hua could see that the immortal piercing whip this time was obviously much dimmer than the previous one. Presumably, it was because Li Zongbao's magic power was insufficient. Woo! The immortal piercing whip whimpered as it smashed towards the remaining beast cultivators. When the 4 or 5 beast cultivators saw how powerful the immortal piercing whip was, they knew that just dodging and running away was absolutely not enough. They roared loudly, and their bodies were also suffused with black light. They waved the demonic artifacts in their hands and bravely attacked the whip shadows. Poo poo poo. Several sounds rang out as the whip shadows hit the demonic artifacts. The demonic artifacts shook and almost fell from the hands of the beast cultivators. However, even so, several beast cultivators still blocked Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip. Only a leopard head beast cultivator's demonic artifact was smashed by the immortal piercing whip and fell into the air. Seeing this, Li Zongbao's face was slightly embarrassed. He clenched his teeth, and the magic power in his body surged again. The immortal piercing whip in his hand suddenly emitted a golden light. In that golden light, talismans circulated, showing extreme power. Attack! Li Zongbao roared, and his body moved along with the whip. 5 immortal piercing whips of the same size appeared in the air and attacked the 5 beast cultivators with earth-shattering force. As for Xiaohua, the cloud-suppressing seal swayed and easily trapped the 6 beast cultivators. He urged his magic power one after another, and one after another, imprisoning clouds fell down. Those 6 beast cultivators were obviously extremely powerful, and their respective devil tools were also extraordinary. Unexpectedly, just like the wolf-headed beast cultivator, they were able to defeat Xiao Hua's clouds one after another. If it was someone else, under the attack of these 6 beast cultivators, even if the cloud-suppressing seal was extraordinary, their magic power would have already been exhausted, just like Li Zongbao. Unfortunately, they encountered Xiao Hua. If Li Zongbao could be called the number 1 person under the Gold Core stage, then Xiao Hua could look down on all the cultivators under the Nascent Soul stage. How could his magic power be measured by these beast cultivators? Following that, the clouds from the cloud-suppressing seal fell one after another, seemingly endless. The beast cultivators finally collapsed. After the final attack, the beast cultivators couldn't even hold their demonic artifacts steadily and were imprisoned by the clouds. Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip split into 5 and attacked the 5 beast cultivators respectively. The beast cultivators looked at each other and knew that this was the final battle to determine victory. Either you die or I die. Therefore, each of them activated all the strength in their body, as well as all the magic power in their body, and waved their demonic weapons, bringing about the sound of wind and drums. Boom! The 5 whips hit the 5 demonic artifacts at almost the same time. The demonic artifacts were all knocked away by the immortal piercing whip's unstoppable force. Moreover, the immortal piercing whip's shadow also imprinted itself onto the 5 beast cultivators as they flew. The 5 beast cultivators screamed at the same time. Their steel-like bodies were torn open, and they fell from the sky. At the same time, Li Zongbao couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale gold. He actually activated his magic power and injured his meridians. Xiao Hua glanced at Li Zongbao. It wasn't out of his expectations. Li Zongbao was only in the late stage of foundation establishment. Facing more than 10 beast cultivators whose strength was comparable to late-stage foundation establishment, being able to perish together with them could be considered rare and commendable. Go! Xiao Hua pointed the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal flew over with a rumble, smashing the beast cultivators that fell from Li Zongbao's attack to death. Only then did it fly back and smash the 6 beast cultivators that were imprisoned by him. Just as they were about to be smashed to death or injured like the cow-headed beast cultivator and the others, a sudden change occurred. The boar-headed beast cultivator that was easily imprisoned earlier suddenly had a burst of multicolored light appear around his body. He immediately broke free from the cloud-suppressing seal's imprisonment and flew away like a wisp of smoke. His flying speed was actually extremely fast. Xiao Hua was stunned and slightly raised his eyebrows. He thoughtfully looked at the boar-headed beast cultivator's back and didn't chase after him in a hurry. Don't let him escape. Li Zhongbao's figure stood in midair. Seeing that Xiao Hua's magic power didn't seem to be exhausted, he lightly said, "Yes, Xiao Hua didn't beat around the bush." He raised his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal became more than 10 feet in size. It smashed down and smashed the 5 beast cultivators into meat paste. Immediately after, Xiao Hua didn't put away the cloud-suppressing seal and shouted, "Brother Li, wait a moment." The magic power in his body surged as he used the hibernating thunder escape and chased after the boar-headed beast cultivator. And Li Zhongbao's face was still calm, but a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He patted his storage bag and swallowed a pill. Then he put away the immortal piercing whip and slowly descended from the sky. After Li Zhongbao cleaned up the corpses of the fallen cultivators, Xiao Hua dragged the boar-headed beast cultivator's corpse over. Li Zhongbao raised his head and lightly said, "You're quite fast." "Umph. Those who kill my Dao sex cultivators will be killed no matter how far they are." Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and coldly replied, "Those who kill my Dao sex cultivators will be killed no matter how far they are?" Li Zhongbao sneered. "That invisible sword Guyu took the lives of many of my Dao sex disciples. I saw someone cut off her wrist and took her flying sword. However, when I saw that female swordsman's appearance, not only did I immediately return the flying sword and wrist, I even gave her a healing pill. Isn't that a bit ridiculous?" This, Xiao Hua's face was slightly red as he embarrassedly said, "Senior Brother Li, that was purely an instinctive reaction. I really didn't think too much at that time. And I'll just treat it as if I saw someone sleepwalking." Li Zhongbao glanced at the mess on the ground. "But you have to remember that being kind to your enemies is being cruel to yourself. Look at this miserable state. This is a lesson. In the future, when you can't bear to kill, look at these cultivators who died with their eyes open." "Yes, I understand." Xiao Hua's heart trembled as he raised the beast cultivator's corpse in his hand and said, "Didn't I go to kill them all?" "And this is your Imperial Thunder Sex disciple," Li Zhongbao said as he handed over the storage pouch in his hand to Xiao Hua. "You should kill them all." "What? They're actually Imperial Thunder Sex disciples." Xiao Hua looked at the remains of the corpse's Taoist robe. It wasn't the robe worn in the battle. And these cultivators didn't participate in this battle. Li Zhongbao saw that Xiao Hua didn't take the storage pouch and threw it over. "There are some jade slips inside. Take a look yourself." "Yes, Senior Brother Li," Xiao Hua said as he threw the pig-head beast cultivator's corpse down. He spread out his other hand, and a ball of colorful silk appeared. "I found this on this beast cultivator's body. I reckon that guy used this to escape the cloud-suppressing seal's imprisonment. And take it yourself." Li Zhongbao wasn't interested in this thing. He waved his hand and sat down cross-legged, adjusting his breathing. It seemed that using the immortal piercing whip to kill so many beast cultivators at once was a bit inappropriate. Xiao Hua didn't hold back. He took the colorful silk and looked at the storage pouch. He took out a few tokens and looked at them. He also took out a jade slip and looked at it. He frowned and said, "Brother Li, this is my Imperial Thunder Sex disciple. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.